Chapter 833. P. Green Bull had been a professional gamer for many years, but he had never been as successful as he was in the parallel world. Being a professional gamer in an online game was not a glamorous profession. They could barely make ends meet, and the only benefit was that they could earn money by playing the game. However, under the pressure of survival, many professional gamers lost interest in the game. This was a tragedy. What was even more tragic was that this was the final destination for almost every professional gamer. P. Green Bull felt that he was quite lucky. While many of his seniors were playing the game in pain, he was able to play the game happily, and at the same time, he was able to make a living. In the Eagle Group, not only did they receive a fixed salary from Matchless Wonder, the boss of Wonder Studio, but they could also earn some extra money from time to time. The boss, Matchless Wonder, didn't mind them doing this. However, most of their equipment was provided by their boss from his workshop for free, so the owner of the equipment was Matchless Genius. Therefore, if they accidentally dropped any equipment during the process of soliciting private work, they would have to compensate their boss for the loss. However, under the leadership of Eternal, the leader of the Eagle Group, there had never been such an incident. The only two incidents were with Team 2. Because the Eagle Group consisted of 3 teams, there were times when the teams would not go through the entire group, and would instead go out to do some quests. 2 incidents had happened to Team 2, and both times, the players who died had dropped items. The leader of Team 2 was the original leader of the Eagle Group, Rising Eagle. This made everyone feel that changing the leader to Eternal was a wise decision. Even now, no one knew if Rising Eagle had any feelings towards him. After all, the Eagle Group had already been taken over by Matchless Wonder, and the appointment of personnel could be done with just a word from the boss. In reality, Eternal did a better job than Rising Eagle, and everyone was very satisfied with the change of leader. It was because of Matchless Hero's support and equipment that the members of the Eagle Group became experts one by one. The size of the Eagle Group naturally had to follow Matchless Wonder's arrangements. The new members that joined the Eagle Group were all directly recruited by Matchless Wonder, and when the number of members reached 30, Matchless Wonder did not allow them to recruit new people. After all, he had to spend money to support everyone here. The more people he had, the more expenses he had to bear. As long as he had enough people, it was fine. Matchless Hero had never thought of raising a guild. Of course, some people chose to leave during this process. The one that left the deepest impression on Do Qingwan was Drifting. He was a famous master mage in the parallel world. He had been in the Eagle Group for a while. At that time, the leader was still Soaring Eagle. Originally, the Eagle Group wouldn't be recruiting anymore, but the boss couldn't bear to reject such a famous master like Drifting. However, Drifting and his 2 companions didn't stay for long before they decided to leave. Little Bean Green Bull wasn't sure if the boss had asked for them to stay, but he didn't think so. After all, with Matchless Genius's daily needs, 30 people were more than enough. After Drifting, the Eagle Group's lineup had been very stable, until Forever became the group leader, and continued to serve the boss. They went to many main cities in the southeast, mainly to choose the most luxurious missions in each city for the boss to do. Of course, normal players didn't have such conditions when playing the game, but Matchless Hero was able to reach such a high level under such luxurious conditions. Thinking of the boss's luxurious growth, Little Bean Green Bull couldn't help but sigh. This was fate. Having money and not having money were really different. But now Little Bean Green Bull was ranked 13th on the mage leaderboard. He was quite satisfied with himself. His biggest dream was to surpass Drifting and become the top mage. However, things changed after the city war. Qianli's Drunk became the top mage in the entire game, and the top mage leaderboard. Even if he surpassed Drifting, he could only be ranked 2nd on the leaderboard. But Little Bean Green Bull's goal didn't change. He heard that their mission this time was to fight against Qianli's Drunk. Although he heard that this person was very strong, Little Bean Green Bull felt that he would disappear from the top 10 mages leaderboard. This was a goal that didn't need to be surpassed. How many PKs have you killed? A voice suddenly interrupted Little Bean Green Bull's daydream. The person who asked the question was called Lu Lan, ranked 14th on the Archer leaderboard. He and Little Bean Green Bull were currently hunting in the warrior camp area. Both of them were long-range classes, so they had good equipment and high attack. Their coordination was also very good. Basically, any character that couldn't reach them would be killed. However, after hunting for a day, the 10 Guild Alliance's players were becoming more and more cautious. There were fewer and fewer solo players. The brothers at the revival points hadn't opened for business in a while. Lulan thought that since there wasn't much business, he might as well go and clear his PK points. Speaking of which, the intense battle with Cloud Morning's 50 or so players had put a lot of pressure on the members of the Eagle Corps. At that time, they all had PK points. They thought that their opponents would be easy to deal with, but they didn't expect them to be so fearless. At that time, 4 members of the Eagle squad had almost died. Fortunately, the squad leader Forever had set up a proper formation, and he had a better grasp of everyone's lives. Those who were about to die were quickly protected by the squad, but it was inevitable that they would experience such a frightening experience. Even though this was a quest for the boss and they didn't have to pay for the equipment they dropped, if the losses were severe, it would mean that they didn't complete the quest well. The boss didn't want them to pay for the equipment, so he would deduct their bonuses. I have 7 points. Little Bean Green Bull replied. I have 4 points. We haven't seen anyone in a while. Why don't we go and clear our PK points? Lulan said. That's a good idea. Little Bean Green Bull nodded. They hadn't killed anyone in a while, so it was quite boring to just walk around on the streets. After the two of them finished their discussion, they headed towards the wanted quest office. When they passed by a large street, there was a shop that belonged to Ingenious. The two of them looked around and saw that there were a few dozen people gathered in front of the shop. They didn't know what they were doing. The two of them knew that something was wrong. They looked at each other and pretended like nothing was happening as they walked over. They didn't need to get too close. Lulan's eagle eye could see clearly from a few dozen meters away. His expression changed. It's the 10 Guilds people. Guard the shop. They've guessed our strategy, Little Bean Green Bull said. Hurry and report this to the leader, Lulan said as he sent a message to Eternal. At the same time, the two of them turned around and didn't dare to walk past the shop. Although they were experts, there were only 2 of them. They didn't dare to fight against a few dozen people. There were no rookies in the 10 Guild Alliance. Eternal didn't panic when he received Lulan's message. He even laughed. There are too many shops. Can they guard all of them? A few dozen people? Aren't they just giving themselves up for us to kill? Everyone in the districts. Look at the distribution of troops guarding the shops. The messages from the districts came back at different times, but the conclusion was the same. There were no guards outside the shop. Eternal finally realized that the situation wasn't as simple as it seemed. At the same time, Lulan sent another message. There were many people from the 10 Guild Alliance in the area around the warrior camp. However, the two of them hadn't been discovered yet, and were currently looking for a way out. What are you waiting for? Use the teleportation scrolls and leave immediately. Eternal shouted anxiously. In the end, he didn't receive a reply. Eternal went silent twice, but there was still no reply. He knew that the two of them must have encountered enemies and couldn't spare the effort to reply to his message. In the arrangement of the 10 Society Alliance, the people guarding the street did not have to guard it as they did to the shops. After all the points were occupied, they could shrink a little from the street entrance as long as they did not expose any of the entrances of the alleys. The real search team had already entered the district and scattered into the alleys. Lulan and Green Bean Bull turned left and right, and kept finding people from the 10 Guild Alliance. The more people there were, the more obvious the target would be. The two of them could always avoid them in advance. After turning around, they realized that there were fewer and fewer paths. The two of them felt that something was wrong. At this moment, Eternal's message arrived. Everyone in the Eagle group had teleportation scrolls. Just as the two of them were about to grab the scrolls, an arrow suddenly flew towards them. The two of them were startled and quickly dodged. The two of them were very experienced and instantly determined the direction of the arrow. When they looked up, they saw 6 players rushing towards them. Lulan's eagle eyes were sharp. He realized that one of the 6 people was from the 10 Guild Alliance. He almost forgot that there were people from the 10 Guild Alliance on the move. He was careless and didn't notice these 6 people. Green Bean Bull glanced at them, and his heart skipped a beat. He couldn't see the badge on the chest of the player from the 10 Guild Alliance, but he felt that one of the sorcerers looked familiar. Could it be him? As Green Bean Bull was thinking, the 6 people had already rushed a few steps closer. Archer, Mage, Warrior, Pugilist, Priest, Rogue. Lulan reported the classes of the 6 people in one breath. Experienced experts could basically tell their classes from their attire. The opponent's sorcerer attacked almost as Lulan spoke. With a wave of his staff, Green Bean Bull glanced at the opponent's direction and dragged Lulan to dodge. The difficulty of this dodge was surprisingly low. The 2 of them just casually took a few steps forward and were already out of the attack range of the spell. However, as experts, the 2 of them didn't think that the opponent's sorcerer was too crude. On this day, the Taming Will actually didn't place the 2 of them at the core of the spell. An AoE spell wasn't something that players couldn't dodge. Even if they were in the middle of the spell, as long as their judgment was accurate, they would have enough time to dodge the spell. The opposing mage clearly understood this point, so he chose to place the 2 of them in a corner. This way, the 2 of them could easily dodge the spell if they moved forward or left, but they couldn't move backward or right. Green Bean Bull made a good judgment and dodged it easily, but he had to further close the distance between him and the 6 people. The purpose of this spell wasn't to attack them, but to cut off their escape route. The 2 of them quickly understood this method. Under continuous attacks, the teleportation scroll would definitely be interrupted, and they wouldn't have a chance to use it at all. However, it wasn't a solution to be forced to the front step by step. The 6 opponents weren't scary, but it would be troublesome if the 6 opponents were already close to them. After all, the 2 of them were long-range classes that were afraid of close combat. In an instant, the opponent's sorcerer had already raised his hand to continue chanting, but Lulan turned around and said to Green Bean Bull, "Ignore it, run." No. Green Bean Bull desperately held on to Lulan. Lulan was startled, and he didn't resist. He thought that the opponent's sorcerer was still using the same method, trying to take the damage of a spell to increase the distance between them. However, when he saw Green Bean Bull pulling him, he thought that the opponent wasn't using the same method this time. After all, Green Bean Bull was a master sorcerer, and he had more accurate judgment of the sorcerer's spells. Lulan followed Green Bean Bull a few steps to the side, and it wasn't hard for him to dodge the spell. He was startled and realized that the opponent was still using the same method. He thought that Green Bean Bull had made a mistake, but Green Bean Bull explained to him, "Don't you recognize that sorcerer? That's drifting." Drifting? Lulan was startled, and then he understood why Green Bean Bull didn't let him take the damage and run. Drifting had been in their Eagle party before, and this all-knowing sorcerer in the parallel world had shockingly high damage. None of the sorcerers in the fully equipped Eagle party could compare to him. They couldn't take his spells head-on. At the very least, they had to get some equipment that could resist magic damage. Otherwise, the risk was too high. They might not be able to kill him instantly, but who knew if he had any follow-up tricks up his sleeve? Kill him first. Lulan raised his hand and shot, showing no mercy to his old friend. Green Bean Bull didn't hesitate. Drifting was a goal that he wanted to surpass, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to kill him here. Lulan's arrow was very fast, almost arriving in a flash. However, the warrior who had been rushing forward suddenly raised his left hand and held his shield horizontally, firmly blocking Lulan's arrow. Green Bean Bull's chain fireball was a lot slower, and it hit the shield without any suspense. Almost at the same time, a white light bathed the warrior, but Lulan and Green Bean Bull didn't see where the cleric was. The moment the opponent charged forward, the cleric had already hidden behind someone. He was able to hide so well, and it was obvious that he was very good at cooperating. The warrior put away his shield after blocking the attack, but he didn't expect that the fireball that exploded in front of the shield was still there. Bang! 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 The fireball kept exploding as it continued to fly forward. This was out of everyone's expectations. The warrior wanted to stop it, but it was too late. The fireball exploded and was about to reach Drifting. Drifting hurriedly raised his staff and chanted, "Scatter Ice Shadow." For drifts appeared in an instant, and the exploding fireballs surrounded one of them. The explosion engulfed that drifting's afterimage in the blink of an eye. Then, it continued to explode while flying forward for a long time before gradually disappearing. What a pity! Green Bean Bull cried in his heart. His fireball combo was strengthened by the skills of his equipment. Compared to the ordinary fireball combo, there were some changes. That was, the explosion effect could be sustained, and the duration was determined by the caster. However, it was not the kind of spell that consumed mana continuously. Instead, the caster could determine the mana consumption of the spell once and for all during the chant. Thus, after the explosion, until all the magic power was used up, the explosion would continue. The Green Bean Bull had once used 100% of its magic power to create a candied haw with this move, and a white light flashed. Drifting was experienced, and he knew that this spell was not ordinary. He didn't even dare to dodge, afraid that something strange would happen. He simply used Ice Shadow, which was also a kind of teleportation. As soon as he landed, Drifting raised his staff and was about to attack. Although Lulan knew that he had to interrupt Drifting, there were still 3 Drifting in the field, and he didn't know which one was the real one. In a panic, he raised his bow and twisted his body, shooting 2 consecutive arrows in different directions. Lulan accurately grasped the tiny gap between the 2 arrows and twisted his body. The 2 consecutive arrows were aimed at different Drifting. Unfortunately, Drifting was interrupted. His opponent chose 2 out of 3, and there was a 66% chance that he guessed Drifting's real body. Drifting dodged the arrows, but unfortunately, he couldn't chant the spell. But it was only temporary. After he teleported, Drifting raised his staff again. Lulan was depressed. The 3 Drifting figures all did the same thing. His 2 arrows were all dodged, so he was sure that one of them was Drifting's real body, but he didn't know which one it was. Green Bean Bull was indeed a master. He seemed to have expected this. When Drifting dodged, he immediately used Skyfall Fire Wheel to buckle one of the Drifting figures, and Lulan hurriedly shot an arrow at the other one. Both Drifting figures had been attacked, so it was inevitable that their chanting would be interrupted. But then they found that Drifting didn't dodge. Under the 2 attacks, Drifting disappeared instantly, but there was no white light of death. The 2 were stunned, and then they realized what was going on. They looked at the 3rd Drifting and shouted, "Fuck!" It turned out that the 2 Drifting figures were just illusions. Drifting deliberately dodged Lulan's arrow, and the 2 thought that one of the 2 Drifting figures was his real body, so they focused their attention on the 2 targets. The one they thought was an illusion was Drifting's real body. At this time, an unstoppable spell was released. Double Lotus Fire. Drifting's real attack didn't even have time to chant. 2 waves of fire rolled over. The large area of effect made Lulan and Green Bean Bull unable to dodge, and they were burned. This area of effect attack wasn't like Skyfall Fire Wheel, which only dealt 1 damage. It was like Flaming Tree 1000 layers of flames, which had a continuous effect. The 2 saw that Drifting was still in his position, and they knew that this was a spell that could continuously inject mana to maintain damage. If the 2 were hit for a few more seconds, they would definitely die. Lulan hurriedly shot an arrow at Drifting, and then rushed forward with Green Bean Bull. If they hit the target, they could naturally interrupt the spell, but they didn't dare to put all their hopes on it. Looking at the current situation, they could still rush out of the sea of fire safely. Of course, it would be better if they could hit Drifting. In the end, a person stepped out and used his body to block the arrow flying towards him. It was impossible to interrupt the spell, so the 2 hurriedly rushed out of the sea of fire, but they saw that the warrior had already blocked them with a sword and a shield. An archer and a sorcerer wanted to rush through the warrior. The 2's hearts sank. Chapter 834. Piqing was also valiant. Seeing that it would be extremely difficult to break through the warrior's blockade, the moment he rushed out, he rolled up a spell and prepared to chant a rapid fireball. With such a close distance between them, the damage they received after his enhanced version of rapid fireball exploded was not much different. Warriors had high HP, but mages had high magic defense. It was hard to say who would die first under the same amount of magic damage. But no matter what, this was a lose-lose strategy. The chances of both sides dying together were very high. Green Bull had learned this move from Wuxia novels. He was basically going to die, so he used a suicidal move. Most of the time, it was the opponent who treasured his life and dodged. Hence, he often gained the upper hand. This move was quite useful in the game. After all, everyone treasured their levels the most. Almost no one was willing to sacrifice a level for the sake of killing someone else. But the game was different from Wuxia novels. At least right now, the opponent had a cleric who could heal them, while Green Bean Bull had Flowing Wind, who was on the verge of death. That was why the warrior didn't dodge at all. When Green Bean Bull's spell was cast, the warrior raised his hand and swung his shield at Green Bean Bull's head. The difference in strength between a warrior and a mage was like two extremes. If they fought like this, the mage would definitely be sent flying. Green Bean Bull was sent flying by the warrior just like that. This display of strength made the warrior look very mighty, but in reality, experienced warriors would rarely do this in real PvP. This was because warriors were slow, very slow, and the speed of movement in the game was also related to attributes and equipment. This had always been a controversial setting, so if a warrior really did send someone flying in a PvP, and then the opponent stood up and ran, there was a high chance that they would not be able to catch up. Warriors had to work very hard to get the chance to fight in close combat. They didn't cherish the opportunity. If they sent someone flying, they wouldn't be able to kill them. Of course, the situation was different now. Green Bean Bull was sent flying back into Drifting's flames. Seeing that the two of them had rushed out of the sea of fire, Drifting was about to let others deal with them. When he was about to extinguish the spell, he suddenly saw that the Green Pea Bull was sent back, so he had to add more fire. The Green Pea Bull did not have much HP left in the first place. After being slapped away by the warrior, the Green Pea Bull was tossed into the sea of fire to roast. Finally, before the Green Pea Bull could do anything, its HP had been whittled away. With his death, the power of his chain of fireballs immediately disappeared. Although the warrior was a little shocked by the explosion, he didn't care anymore. However, P. Green Bull's death had some other value. Due to the exchange of blows between him and the warrior, Flowing Mist seized the opportunity to dash past the warrior. As long as he could break through this obstacle, with the speed of the 14th ranked archer, his chances of escaping would increase greatly. However, Lulan did not expect that when he ran past the warrior, a staff would suddenly come out from the side and trip his foot. Lulan couldn't dodge in time. Although she didn't fall immediately, she stumbled. From the corner of his eyes, he saw a priest crouching behind the warrior. This strike was from the priest who had stretched out his staff. This trip did not cause any damage, but Lulan knew that because of this trip, he had completely lost his chance to escape. A gust of wind blew past his face, and a fist had already flown in front of him. Lulan's unsteady body continued to stagger as she was hit. She swayed and hit the wall. Lulan didn't even have time to make any adjustments. The opponent's attack had already quickly followed up. With such a strong chain of attacks, it was obvious that it was a grandmaster of combat in the game. Lulan, who didn't have much health left, was also killed off in a few hits from her left hand. The two of them were successfully killed, and the group of 6 heaved a sigh of relief. The battle wasn't as simple as it looked, and there were many perils in between. In particular, P-Bull's enhanced chain of fireballs was very strange. If it wasn't for the fact that he died quickly after falling into the drifting flames, Kinenyu suspected that the chain of fireballs would have blown him up. With the speed at which his HP was decreasing, Kinenyu didn't know if Dao Xiangmu, who was behind him, could be saved. The warrior was Kinenyu, the priest was Dao Xiangmu, and the Grandmaster of Combat and Archer were, of course, Left-Hand Love and Right-Hand Handsome. As for the thief, he was just a random member of the 10 Meetings Alliance. During the battle, he wanted to rush forward, but he realized that he couldn't do anything. The battle between these top experts had quick thinking and quick changes. While he was still thinking about what to do next, he didn't even know how many rounds they had fought. "How are you?" Of course, Drifting stopped casting spells and asked Kinenyu. He saw Kinenyu's expression change after he was hit by the chain of fireballs. He felt that there was something strange about that spell, and as a magician, he was naturally interested. Almost. Kinenyu was a little scared. It was more powerful than normal chain of fireballs, and it lasted longer. If it continued, a priest wouldn't be able to offset the damage. As expected, they have some skills, Drifting said. Didn't you play with them before? Do you know them? Yu asked. Drifting shook his head. I haven't seen them in a long time, so I don't have much of an impression. However, I should be able to recognize their old leader, Soaring Eagle. Drifting had traveled all over the place, and he knew people like he was looking at flowers on horseback. In the end, the people who knew him were far more than the people he knew. At this moment, Dao Xiangmu, who was behind Yu, came out. With an agility that didn't match a priest's, he quickly rushed to the place where the two of them had died. He almost dug up the ground to check, but in the end he said in disappointment, "So unlucky, nothing dropped." He was unlucky, but to Green Bean Bull and Flowing Mist, it was their biggest fortune. The two of them had PK points, so after dying, they would definitely lose 2 levels. As soon as the revival point appeared, they immediately checked their equipment. The only consolation was that they didn't drop any equipment. Then they reported the bad news to Forever. When Forever didn't receive a reply from the two of them, he knew that they were in trouble. Then he immediately reminded the others to not hesitate and immediately teleport away if they noticed any similar movements. Then he waited for the two of them to reply, hoping that they would have a chance to escape. When the two of them finally replied, they both died. He could only sigh in regret. With 30 people against 4,000 people from the 10 Guild Alliance, honestly speaking, Forever didn't expect that there wouldn't be any sacrifices. However, he still hoped that the losses would be as low as possible. After going through so much trouble for the entire day, even when fighting against Yin Zhongmu's valiant team, not a single person died. Forever was quite satisfied, but who would have thought that they would lose 2 levels each? They didn't even know about such a large-scale movement. While waiting for news from the two of them, Forever went to ask the informants that he had bribed. In the end, the informants all stupidly said that there was nothing going on. When Forever asked where they were, he found out that they were in the warrior camp area, but they said that they were helping guild members do quests. Now Forever's heart was clear. This time, the enemy's movements were extremely fast. By the time they found out, it was already too late to salvage the situation. When Forever saw this, he immediately gave orders to his subordinates in the other regions. Don't wait for anything strange to happen before teleporting away. Immediately retreat. The enemy had clearly considered the problem of manpower, so they moved one region at a time. Fortunately, there were only 2 people in the warrior camp area. If the enemy had chosen the Mage Academy from the start, their losses would have been even greater. The Eagle Party had a total of 5 people roaming around the Mage Academy area. Their distribution of people was also meticulous. There were 7 revival points, but because of the different geographical locations, the popularity of each revival point was different. It wasn't necessary for players to return to the revival point of their profession to log in and out. Because the Mage Academy was the closest to the leveling area, the Mage Academy in Moonlit Night City had the most player movement. As such, it became the focus of the Eagle Party's ambush. Forever couldn't see the enemy's movements clearly, so he had them temporarily disperse. Then he went to find Green Bean Bull and Flowing Mist to understand the situation. Green Bean Bull and Flowing Mist had directly died in the main city where their accounts were located. At this moment, they used a teleportation scroll and directly flew back. Forever didn't need to walk anymore. He directly teleported, and the 3 of them immediately met up at the same location. In the game, financial support was undoubtedly a huge help. Just the teleportation scrolls alone were enough for Gu Fei to torment the Unchung Mutsu Black Index Finger and the others to death. At this time, the Eagle Party had a strong backer, so they didn't lack these items. Moreover, this was a battle of revenge for the boss. A player who was willing to pay 30 people to serve him in the game obviously wasn't a stingy person. Before the battle began, these items were already given to Forever and Flowing Mist. At this moment, Forever had a rough idea of the enemy's arrangements. After listening to Green Bean Bull and Flowing Mist's description, it was basically the same as what he expected. However, when he heard that the enemy was drifting, his expression changed. Drifting? Why would he come here and help the 10 Guild Alliance? Forever couldn't understand. As players far away in the other corner of the world, They didn't know that drifting was currently in very overpowered. 5 Knights' actions against very overpowered, but he didn't care about the exact details. He was someone who only cared about the results. He used the guild to complete the battle, so he didn't care about it. He only knew that very overpowered was a guild established by Qianli Drunk and the others. In the city battle, if the defenders won, they would receive a bunch of rewards. I think the 10 Guild Alliance probably specially hired some experts to deal with us? Green Bean Bowl guessed. At that time, he had started fighting and didn't even greet drifting. Moreover, from the way he looked at drifting, it seemed like he didn't know them. That's possible. Forever nodded. Then he asked for more details about the enemy's combat team. Of course, it wasn't surprising that the left hand wrote love, and the right hand wrote handsome. Those who knew drifting would probably have a deeper impression of these two. In that battle, apart from drifting, the warrior's performance was also very eye-catching. There was also the priest who hid behind the warrior. Lulan had the deepest impression of him. Warrior? Could it be Cloud Cities unscathed in battle? Forever was quite concerned about this expert. I don't think so. Unscathed in battle is a berserk warrior, right? But that warrior was holding a shield in one hand. Green Bean Bowl said. Shields required a shield attribute. Currently, only warriors had this ability. For other classes, even if you held a shield, it was the same as not having one. Maybe he's also an expert from the outside. Lulan said. If that's the case, then there might be more people coming. There might be other experts. Forever said. The two were silent. Soaring Eagle Shisan. Forever called out in their Eagle group channel. The two replied at the same time. You two take a look around and see what the enemy is planning at the spawn points. Forever said. Okay. The two replied. Both of them were thieves. Sneaking around and scouting was something that thieves often did. However, both of them were assassins. In terms of stealth, Godly Thief class advancement would be even more effective. However, Godly Thieves were slightly weaker than assassins. Currently, there were more assassins in the Thief class. Kite. Forever called out. Here, Kite's full name was One Kite. He was ranked second on the Archer leaderboard. In the Eagle group, apart from Forever who was ranked first on the Knight leaderboard, he was the next highest ranked player. Go to the church on Luminous 2nd Street, and keep an eye out for any unusual movements, Forever instructed. Before coming to Moonlit City, they had studied the terrain. The church on Nightlight 2nd Street wasn't the tallest. However, after reaching the top floor, they could see a large area through the windows on all 4 sides. Forever was meticulous. The tallest place would attract attention. Perhaps the opponent would think of using it to their advantage, so he chose this place. What about me? Lulan, who was beside Forever, asked. This kind of scouting mission was naturally handled by Hawkeye's archer. Forever kite One Kite but didn't call for him. You rest for a while. One kite is enough. Forever patted Lulan. Everyone else rest for a while. We'll wait for further information. After saying this in the chat, Forever went to contact the spies he had bribed. He told them to let him know if there was any movement, no matter what it was. At this moment, the 10 Guilds Alliance erupted into thunderous cheers. Cloud Twilight's face was flushed with excitement. He had finally vented some of the anger he had been holding in for the entire day. He could finally hold his head high in the guild. The Eagle group is a paper tiger. Yin Zhongmu emphasized this time with great confidence and confidence. However, many people in the guild didn't even know about this operation. As such, Cloud Twilight didn't tell them about their complicated arrangements. He only said that a 6-man scouting party encountered 2 players and easily took them down. Look, the opponents are only SOSO. Once they're alone, they can be easily killed. Cloud Twilight said. He didn't even mention the composition of his 6-man scouting party. In reality, there was only one person from their guild, and apart from pointing out the enemy, he wouldn't be of any help in the battle. The guild players didn't care about all this. Once they heard the news of victory, they felt energized. They all asked their guild leader to join the scouting party. In the end, Cloud Twilight said righteously, "We'll take turns and search for him 24/7. Just Eagle Group, How dare they rebel? The guild erupted in cheers once again. Cloud Twilight calmed everyone down and returned to the table. He looked at the experts he invited and said humbly, "What should we do next? I think the opponents aren't stupid. This operation can only be done once. If we change to another area, it'll be useless." Han family young master nodded his head. "However, they know that we have the ability to kill them. Moreover, drifting has infiltrated their eagle group before, so they might have already recognized us. Since they know that there are experts here to help, I think they'll bide their time and try to understand the situation. I didn't tell anyone that you guys are here to help. Those who know are trustworthy brothers," Cloud Twilight said. Han family young master nodded his head. "Let them do as they please. We'll think about how to lure them out." "You have a plan?" Cloud Twilight said. A system notification sounded. "Brother, you came back online. As the weakest member of the elite group, Brother, you didn't need to do anything. As such, everyone gave him an important mission. Go offline and call Qianli. Qianli is coming. Brother, you had gone offline to do this during the scouting operation." Oh. This news was extremely exciting. When Cloud Twilight heard it, he rubbed his hands together happily. "Isn't everything easier now that he's here? Give him the name list," Han family young master said. Cloud Twilight's eyes lit up when he heard this. Of course, he knew about the special function of Gu Fei's wanted license. Yesterday, Gu Fei was doing a wanted mission in Moonlit Night City. Thanks to Cloud Twilight's help, he provided quite a few names. "That's great. That's great." Yin Zhongmu beamed with joy. Gu Fei did things swiftly and decisively. He had probably just received the call. Not long after Brother You came online, the system notification of Qianli coming online flashed in everyone's system notifications. "Where are the experts?" Gu Fei asked. Everyone knew how Brother You had invited him online. "There are a lot of them, and they aren't easy to deal with," the experts in the chat said seriously. "Oh. Who fought against them?" Gu Fei asked. "Me and Jiannan fought against too," Drifting said. "How was it?" Gu Fei asked. "It was a close one," Drifting said. "He was killed by you guys? How can that be considered an expert?" Gu Fei's voice was filled with disappointment. The experts in the chat didn't have any interest in it. "You guys can handle it. I'll go rest," Gu Fei said. The experts were speechless. Could it be that they couldn't handle it? That would hurt their pride. If you didn't have that stupid wanted license that can find people's coordinates, would we need to call you over? Don't be so long-winded. Hurry up and be a guide dog. Han family young master said with disdain. "Who are you looking for?" Gu Fei asked. "Qianli should also come and understand the whole story." "Brother," you said. Everyone was speechless. The whole story hadn't been told yet. That meant that Qianli didn't even ask why he wanted to kill people, and excitedly came up. Moreover, he didn't ask for the reason but instead asked where the experts were. What a violent maniac. Chapter 835. Bring some experts along as well. The cautious Brother You naturally hoped for as many people as possible, so he added this to Gu Fei. They also knew that many experts came to help because of Gu Fei. For example, Slender Waist Dance, 100 Times Statecraft, Boundless Mang, and Sakurazuka Tsukuzi's Flower Cluster. These people's relationships were actually established through Gu Fei. The relationship between them and the others could not be said to be close, but it could not be said to be close either. Coming. After Gu Fei responded, he asked for everyone's location. In less than a minute, the tavern door opened and Gu Fei came in. Everyone was shocked. No matter which revival point in Moonlit Night City, it wouldn't be this quick to come to this tavern. Everyone looked at Gu Fei suspiciously. When he sat down, they immediately asked, "How did you get here so quickly?" "Oh, I received a wanted quest and teleported," Gu Fei said. "What do you mean?" Everyone didn't understand. "Didn't Drifting and Big South PK just now? I tried to receive it, and then teleported to a nearby location with the wind-chasing emblem. Isn't that a lot faster?" Gu Fei said. "Who did you get?" Drifting couldn't help but ask. "Is there any suspense?" Jianan smiled. He did participate in the battle, but the PK points didn't go to him. The 2 PK points went to Drifting and Love Left Hand. Drifting also thought of this. He glanced at Gu Fei, who was looking at him. Gu Fei nodded and said, "If you are about to die, I can send you to the dungeon." "Thank you." Drifting moved a bench and sat far away from Gu Fei. Gu Fei accepted this quest purely for the convenience of traveling. His wanted quest record had been broken yesterday, so he didn't care if he couldn't complete another quest. After the necessary greetings were done, everyone explained the current situation in a few words. When Gu Fei heard that the 10 Society Alliance had gotten into trouble for helping them, he couldn't avoid it anymore. He immediately asked Yin Zhongmu, "Who do you want to find?" "Forever." Yin Zhongmu immediately reported the name of the leader of the Eagle Group. Gu Fei immediately did as he was told. After searching, he said helplessly, "No." "Why not?" Everyone was shocked. "Because he doesn't have PK points." Gu Fei looked at the experts like they were idiots. Everyone was ashamed, but they hadn't used it before. It was forgivable if they didn't have experience. "Find another one," Gu Fei said to Yin Zhongmu. "Here's the name list." Brother Yu went overboard and handed over the names of all 30 members of the Eagle Group. Gu Fei immediately searched for one and glared at Brother Yu. "How do I find someone who's not online?" "There's someone offline." Brother Yu moved his head closer. Of course, the name list they had didn't include the information of the Eagle Group. Eternal was the first in line, and the second in line was a comrade from Team 3, who was currently offline. 88 Shisan, 88 Shisan. Cloud Twilight provided another name. Logically speaking, the 10 Societies Alliance's hatred for the 30 members of the Eagle Group didn't differ much. However, 88 and Zissin were too arrogant. They went straight into the crowd and killed people. After they were done, they even announced their names loudly outside. Naturally, their hatred was greater. When Yin Zhongmu saw that he couldn't capture Capture King for the time being, he immediately threw him out. "Weird name," Gu Fei said as he searched. He was pleasantly surprised. "Found it." Then, just as Cloud Twilight said the word that, Gu Fei had already disappeared in a flash of white light. Disorganized and undisciplined. Han Family Young Master took a sip of his wine and said in disdain, "The problem is, we're going to kill them, not send them to the dungeon, right?" Brother Yu said in a daze. "That's why he ran so fast. He still has to wait," Han Family Young Master said. "I'll send him a message." Brother Yu was just too worried. He immediately sent a message to Gu Fei. On the streets of Moonlit Night City, 88 Shisan was strolling around as if nothing had happened. He disapproved of Eternal's cautiousness. Killing the target in the midst of the opponent's crowd, and then retreating unscathed made Bison's confidence inflated, and he despised the 10 Societies Alliance to the extreme. He had never been a person who knew how to be humble. At this moment, he didn't even use stealth. He was just walking on the streets. He felt that even if he encountered a large group of people, he could use stealth, teleportation scroll, or just rely on his speed to escape. There were many ways to escape. He was currently scouting the Knights' camp. In fact, their people had just left the district. There was no ambush at all. However, Eagle, who was scouting the warriors' camp, had just sent news that the enemy's ambush at the warriors' camp had ended. It was possible for them to switch to the Knights' camp. Although 88 Shisan was arrogant, his attitude was still very proper. Although he didn't hide himself very well, he still observed his surroundings very carefully. Everything on the streets was normal. There was nothing unusual. 88 Shisan had just stayed near a Ingqi shop for a while, but he didn't see the other party organize people to come over. "It's nothing," 88 Shisan muttered as he continued to walk forward. There was a crossroad ahead. 88 Shisan walked to the crossroad and was thinking about which direction to go when he heard someone call, 88 Shisan, someone is looking for you." 88 Shisan subconsciously turned around and saw a person leaning against the wall on the right corner. He was wearing a black robe and had a dark purple longsword in his hand. He was looking at him with a smile. 88 Shisan's heart tightened. Black cloak, purple sword. This target was too obvious. For example, a normal mage who was mistaken for 1,000 miles drunk was usually dressed in black. Up until now, No one had been able to disguise this dark purple longsword. Qianli drunk. 88 Shisan said in a deep voice. After a moment of shock, he immediately calmed down. He wasn't afraid of Qianli drunk. He had dared to assassinate Qianli drunk when he was in a group of people. Now that he met him one-on-one, 88 Shisan was more excited than nervous. After seeing the other party nod, 88 Shisan carefully looked around. He was worried that Qianli would bring people to attack him when he was drunk. Everything was normal, and he didn't see anyone unusual. Qianli drunk had already picked up his sword and walked towards him. He said with a smile, "I heard that you're very arrogant." Yun Zhongmu really hoped that 88 Shisan would die a horrible death. After Gu Fei had teleported away, he still followed the news and told Gu Fei about 88 Shisan's misdeeds. Gu Fei didn't think much of it. He only hoped that this arrogant guy had some real skills. But frankly speaking, Gu Fei didn't have much hope of this. He had been disappointed too many times. No matter how good a game master was, it was nothing to him. If you wanted to compete with him, you couldn't do it without professional combat skills. 88 Shisan was arrogant, but he was still quite cautious when he saw that they were about to fight. He didn't answer Gu Fei at all. His figure sank and disappeared. "I heard that you know anti-stealth. I'd like to see it." 88 Shisan was gone, but he was still talking. However, this was intentional. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately moved to the side. He pretended to be careless and let people identify his position. But in fact, he had already dodged to the side to prepare an ambush. In the end, he was disappointed. Gu Fei didn't move when he heard him speak. Instead, he chatted with him. "Yes, so I know where you are now." After saying that, Gu Fei raised his sword and pointed the tip of the sword at where 88 Shisan was. 88 Shisan wasn't blind. He saw it clearly. He was shocked and quickly moved to the side. In the end, Gu Fei circled around on the spot. The tip of the sword was still pointing at 88 Shisan's position. "See, I didn't lie to you, did I?" Gu Fei smiled. He knew that 88 Shisan was looking at him very seriously. Otherwise, how could his aura be so strong? The more 88 Shisan stared at him, the more Gu Fei knew where he was. Of course, 88 Shisan didn't know this. In his shock, he stared at Gu Fei and moved left and right. In the end, the tip of Gu Fei's sword followed him left and right. It was really accurate. At this point, 88 Shisan had to believe it. When Qianli was drunk, he did have a very strong anti-stealth ability. Not bad. 88 Shisan said and actually exited from stealth. Since his stealth had been completely seen through, there was no point in continuing to do so. After stealth, the reduced movement speed became a burden, so it was better to show himself. 88 Shisan continued to stare at Gu Fei, thinking about how to launch an attack. In the end, he heard Gu Fei ask him, "How much health do you have?" "What?" 88 Shisan was stunned and replied subconsciously, "It's good to know how much health you have. I'm afraid that if I attack too hard, I'll kill you." Gu Fei was very serious. "Ha ha ha ha." 88 Shisan laughed. "You still say that I'm arrogant. I think you're even worse than me." "I'm not arrogant, I'm telling the truth," Gu Fei said. "Okay, then come and kill me," 88 Shisan said. "It's not that I don't want to, it's that I have no choice. I'm on a wanted mission. If I kill you, you'll go to jail. I don't care, but everyone wants to kill you, not send you to jail." "Helpless," Gu Fei said as he shook his head. Fuck. 88 Shisan didn't feel that what Gu Fei said was the truth. He only felt that this person's arrogance had no limit. Finally, he couldn't hold it in anymore. With a loud shout, he rushed over with his sword. Gu Fei casually waved his hand, and with a dang sound, he actually cut 88 Shisan's dagger. Although Gu Fei didn't have much strength, with such a strike, 88 Shisan was caught off guard and the dagger was knocked askew. 88 Shisan was very stunned. His combat experience was not lacking, but in all the battles he had experienced, he had never had the experience of two weapons colliding. Either dodge or stab each other, and the weapons clashed. Wouldn't that be a martial arts movie? It's just a coincidence. 88 Shisan determined that this couldn't have been done intentionally by Gu Fei, so he ran out sideways. His speed was extremely fast, and when Gu Fei turned around, he raised his hand and attacked again. Gu Fei turned around. waved his sword, and with a dang sound, 88 Shisan's dagger was knocked away again. 88 Shisan was stunned again, and even stood on the spot. Suddenly, he felt a blur in front of him, and Gu Fei's sword had already slashed at him. He quickly moved to the side and dodged. Your reaction isn't bad, Gu Fei praised. Humph. 88 Shisan thought that went without saying. But that's all, Gu Fei said. Fuck. 88 Shisan became more and more angry, and ran around Gu Fei like the wind. He was determined to scoop up Gu Fei's back, and then activate swift movement to kill him. Gu Fei didn't follow him this time, and 88 Shisan easily arrived behind Gu Fei. He immediately rushed forward with both hands holding the dagger tightly. He had already decided that this time, even if Qianli knocked his knife in his drunken stupor, he would hold it tightly and stab it into this guy's body. Go to hell. 88 Shisan saw that the knife was about to stab him, and Gu Fei didn't seem to have reacted. He let out an angry roar, and used all his strength to stab out. In the end, 88 Shisan staggered and almost tripped himself. The knife that he stabbed out stabbed into the air. Qianli was drunk and suddenly moved forward a few steps. 88 Shisan couldn't believe it. What was going on? Was his eyes playing tricks on him just now? That was impossible. He was still in a daze. Gu Fei had already said, "What's wrong?" "It's teleportation. Don't you recognize the skills in the game? Didn't you say he was an expert?" Only then did 88 Shisan come to a realization, but at this time, his stumbling body hadn't stabilized yet. Seeing that Gu Fei wasn't far in front of him, he suddenly rolled his eyes and another evil idea came to mind. He simply didn't stabilize his body on purpose and used the momentum of this stumble to sway over, but his murderous intent was already hidden. Who would have thought that Gu Fei would suddenly fly up with a kick? 88 Shisan had never seen anyone in the game who would raise their feet so high during a PK. Even if it was the grandmasters of combat who had attacking methods on their feet, they would only see them jump with flying feet. Such a high foot. What was this? The foot had already landed, and 88 Shisan realized that the foot was about to step on his head. He bent over and pretended to be unstable, but his head was hanging low. 88 Shisan couldn't dodge in time, and his head was stepped on by Gu Fei. With the comparison of his height with Gu Fei, such a thing shouldn't have happened, but this fake stagger gave Gu Fei a chance. What was worse was that although this stagger was half real and half fake, his lower body really wouldn't be stable in such a situation. Even Bai and Shizan themselves might not understand this logic, but how could a professional like Gu Fei not see it? Gu Fei saw clearly where the Type 81 Shisan's center of gravity had shifted when he staggered. He stepped on it and exerted a little force, thus helping the Type 81 Shisan, turning his half-truth into the truth. With a smack, the Type 81 Shisan fell to the ground. What's going on? I was trampled by someone? Yame Zisen couldn't believe that such a thing could happen in a PK. He had actually been trampled to the ground. However, he had no choice but to believe it. Gu Fei's foot was still on the back of his head. Gu Fei didn't hold on to it. As soon as his foot left the ground, Ba Shisan raised his head, and was about to get up when he saw something swaying in front of him. Then he felt something tighten around his neck. Something was strangling him. What are you doing? Baesuk Shisan only felt that today's PK was extremely incomprehensible to him. What kind of strange fighting style was this? In a hurry, Baesuk Shisan couldn't care less about getting up. He waved his hand to grab the thing around his neck. Gu Fei saw it clearly. With a flick of his wrist, the rope wrapped around Baesuk Shisan's wrist. Baesuk Shisan's hand also happened to be on his neck to remove the rope. Gu Fei's hand shook again, and the rope wrapped around Baesuk Shisan's neck again. Then he pulled it tight, and Baesuk Shisan's hand and neck were immediately pulled together. Fuck. What are you doing? Baesuk Shisan was anxious. In the end, he didn't learn his lesson, and his other hand untied the rope. Gu Fei was happy when he saw this. This saved him trouble. He put it on his wrist, wrapped it around his neck, and pulled it tight. His left hand was also pulled to the side of his neck. Baesuk Shisan was shocked. He was about to struggle, but Gu Fei had already quickly made a dead knot behind his neck. He wanted to fight back as soon as possible. Gu Fei's strength was still slightly inferior to his. However, This guy was in a situation that he had never encountered or thought about before. It was just some subconscious actions. He didn't remember things like the judgment of strength in the game. Both of his hands moved to his neck one after another, which made it convenient for Gu Fei. Otherwise, if Gu Fei really wanted to pull him, Gu Fei wouldn't be able to pull his arms. Now that Baisuk Shisan's hands and neck were tied together, it was difficult for him to get up. He arched on the ground like a caterpillar, and it immediately attracted a lot of attention. "What's going on?" someone asked in confusion. Gu Fei didn't answer. He just smiled. Some players saw black shirt and purple sword and suddenly realized who the people in front of them were. Their expressions changed, and they didn't dare to say anything. Why did they care about Qianli's drunken matter? They didn't want to live. There's nothing to see. Everyone disperse. Disperse. Gu Fei had tormented Baisuk Shisan to such a state, but in turn he took care of his reputation and dispersed the crowd. Baisuk Shisan couldn't escape now. He could only wait for someone to kill him. When he thought of this, Gu Fei suddenly froze. He couldn't kill Baisuk Shisan, but anyone else could, including any player on the street. Why did he have to wait for his own people to come? So Gu Fei casually pulled a player who was looking at Baisuk Shisan curiously. "Friend, help me. Hang him up." "What?" The person was puzzled. "Hang him up. Look, he's already tied up. He can't resist. You can hit him and he'll die," said Gu Fei. You're sick." The player cried out in surprise. He broke free from Gu Fei's hand and ran. He looked back 3 times with every step, and even looked back from afar. Gu Fei saw that it had caused a misunderstanding. It was better to wait for his own people. Just as he was about to send a message, he suddenly heard a shout. "Brother Zui." Gu Fei looked in the direction of the voice. 2 people had already arrived. It was Fireball and Coward Savior. Why did these 2 people come? Because Brother Yu had asked Gu Fei to call more experts. Gu Fei looked at his friends and called them. Fireball was quick. After meeting up with Coward Savior, he got a moonlit night city teleportation scroll and flew over. He landed at the knight's camp, the resurrection point. He came even faster than the people in Moonlit Night City. "You came at the right time, kill this person," Gu Fei said. You wouldn't misunderstand Gu Fei's acquaintance. Fireball looked at Gu Fei with admiration. "Brother Zue, your PK value is 29 again? You're too awesome." "I'm on a wanted quest. Kill him and he'll go to jail," explained Gu Fei. "Oh, I see." Fireball kicked Baisuk Shisan. Baisuk Shisan was still struggling on the ground. He rolled forward. His hands were crossed in front of his neck, but it looked like he was crossing his arms to protect his chest. Fireball was shocked. "What are you doing? I'm not raping you." Chapter 836. Let go of me. Byasin roared as he was flipped over by Fireball. He was a pretentious and arrogant fellow. Of course, he was also a person who cared about his face. Otherwise, he would have just tied his hands and neck together, and he wouldn't have been unable to even turn over. He didn't turn over because he would rather lie on his stomach and hide his face. His current appearance, whether it was a stranger or an acquaintance, would be extremely embarrassing. But with Fireball's lasciviousness, as soon as he saw Bai Shisan's expression, he immediately smiled obscenely and ignored him. He looked at Gu Fei and asked, "Brother Zue, how are you going to deal with him?" "Kill him." Gu Fei didn't waste any more time. What a pity. Fireball was reluctant to part with Byasin's appearance, intentionally stalling for time. "Hurry up and kill me." Byasin also changed his words. He felt that it was childish to shout, "Let go just now." With his current appearance, Byasin didn't care about the loss of his life. He just wanted to die quickly. "What's the hurry, brother? Look at how nice the weather is. Let's have a chat," Fireball said. "Motherfucker." Byasin cursed angrily. However, Fireball wasn't the type to be angered by mere vulgarities. It continued to smile, and was about to say something when Gu Fei, who was beside it, became impatient. "Hurry up. What are you waiting for? I'll do it." Coward Savior wasn't as despicable as Fireball. He immediately went forward to help. Fireball hurriedly stopped Coward Savior. "Don't do it, I'll do the dirty work." He then turned around and chanted, throwing a fireball at Bison. Bison almost fainted when he saw the loss of his HP. It had dropped by about 1%. The bastard in front of him had trash equipment, and didn't even use his staff. He was trying to kill him with 100 fireballs. Brother Zue, do you think he'll still look like this if he dies and is sent to the resurrection point? Fireball chatted with Gufei while throwing fireballs. I'm not too sure either, Gufei said. Bison panicked. He didn't know the answer either. If he died and returned to the respawn point, he would still be in this state. What was the point of seeking a quick death? Why don't we drag him to the entrance of the resurrection point? Then kill him and observe the system settings in this situation. Fireball looked serious, as if he was doing some important scientific research, but Mayuzumi immediately understood. This bastard wanted to parade him through the streets in his current state. But at this time, when Bison thought that it was very likely that he would still look like this even if he died and resurrected, he had the desire to live again. He hadn't sent a distress signal to his brothers in the Eagle Regiment, because he didn't want them to see him like this. Would they be able to hold their heads up high again? But at this moment he realized that it was useless even if he died, so he couldn't care less. He immediately sent out a message asking for help. He didn't care about being paraded on the streets anymore. Wouldn't this give his brothers time to rescue him? He immediately shouted at the fireball. How dare you? He knew that he didn't have the capital to threaten them. Yelling "You dare?" would only prove to him that they dared to do so. Sure enough, Fireball laughed and said, "Why wouldn't I dare?" After saying that, he began to look around to figure out how to drag Bison away. Yamishi-san was secretly delighted. Forever also replied and asked him what was going on. Just as Yamishi-san was about to describe it, he heard Thousand Miles Drunk say, "Aren't you annoying? Hurry up and kill him. There's something else." Gufei also saw through Fireball's thoughts. Although Bison felt that he was the one who caused the humiliation, Gufei had no intention of deliberately insulting others. He couldn't kill him, and he was afraid that he would run away. Wouldn't he have to tie him up? It was just that in an online environment, people were not killed but tied up, which was even more unusual. Seeing Fireball deliberately teasing him, Gufei couldn't stand it anymore. Fireball was still smiling. "Brother Zue, it's not easy for you to tie him up. It would be a pity to kill him just like that." However, Gufei said, "How is it not easy? It's very easy." Bison was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He had never been looked down upon like this before. Gufei didn't waste time with Fireball and said to the coward savior, "Coward, kill him quickly." "Call me coward savior." The coward savior came up with some dissatisfaction. This time Fireball said helplessly, Okay. He reluctantly began to attack Bison seriously. Thus Fireball finally destroyed Bison with flames and fists. The white light flashed and lit up. Shi-san was resurrected. The resurrected Bison was in tears. Because the unfortunate thing finally happened, he was still tied up and appeared at the resurrection point. Resurrection would remove some of the debuffs on the player, such as dizziness, slowdown, silence, and so on. However, the system didn't seem to care about his tied-up hands. Fortunately, Bison resurrected standing up, which made him a lot less embarrassed. Although there were people coming and going in the resurrection point, if one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't notice that Bison was tied up. Bison hurriedly moved to a corner and sat down, hiding his appearance. The terrifying onlookers finally didn't appear. "Bison, what's going on? Why aren't you saying anything?" Bison's messages kept flashing. It was Eternity calling him. Bison suddenly didn't reply. Eternity's heart sank again. He had a bad feeling. "Qianli is a lunatic, a pervert." Bison replied to Eternity. "You met him?" Eternity hurriedly asked. Bison had only called for help before. He didn't have time to explain the details. "It's him." Bison gritted his teeth. "What's going on?" Eternity asked. "What's going on?" Bison felt the bindings between his neck and wrists in a daze. Why did this happen? Bison couldn't explain it clearly. What was going on? He also wanted to know. After destroying Bison, Gufei sent a message to Yin Zhongmu, telling them not to come. Han family young master was furious when he heard this. Didn't I tell you to wait? Wait for what? I've got helpers. Let's destroy him, Gu Fei said. Damn. We'll use him as bait to lure out all the opponents and kill them all in one fell swoop, Han family young master said. It's nothing. I'll look for them one by one. Gu Fei took out the list and prepared to search for the next one. Then find eternity. Han family young master wasn't in a good mood. Why do you care so much about this eternity? Gu Fei asked. He's the group leader, Han family young master said. Oh, it's only a matter of time, Gu Fei said as he searched through the list of 30 people. 10 of them were offline and 6 had no PK value. 14 people had been targeted by Gu Fei, including Bison, who had just suffered a tragedy. If Gu Fei didn't kill him, then the mission wasn't over. Yin Zhongmu and the others had been rushing over. Gu Fei and the others were about to rush to the next target, but they encountered this large group of people. Brother Yu was surprised to see Fireball and Coward Savior. Why are you guys here? Brother Zui told me to come, Fireball said. Brother Yu looked at Gu Fei. Gu Fei looked at him in confusion. Didn't you say to call more people? I think I said to call experts, Brother Yu said. I'm here. Gu Fei patted his chest. The group was helpless and could only ask Gu Fei what to do next. Gu Fei pointed at the list and said, I've already found 14 people. I can find them at any time. But if you don't let me kill them, then it'll be a bit troublesome. Gu Fei had been lucky to capture Bison. Gu Fei didn't think the chances of success were high if he had to exchange Bison for a warrior. That's not important. Qianli, just tell me the coordinates at any time. I'll organize people to surround and capture them, Yin Zhongmu hurriedly said. When Gu Fei saw this, he realized that he was really just a navigator. He didn't even need to kill people. He had no choice but to announce the coordinates. Yin Zhongmu also quickly organized people. Because the targets were displayed, the opponents were basically scattered. At most, they were in groups of 2 or 3, so they didn't need too many people. Yin Zhongmu relied on their familiarity with the city's terrain. After forming many teams, they began to surround and kill the people whose coordinates were known. Bison's coordinates caught everyone's attention. These coordinates could be said to be 108,000 miles away from Qianli. They clearly weren't from Moonlit Night City. From the looks of it, they didn't register in Moonlit Night City. When they died, they went back home. Brother Yu said. Unfortunately, we've already used it on him once, Gu Fei said regretfully. It can teleport that far? Brother Yu was shocked. It said that it's a temporary function. Gu Fei said. What do you mean it's a temporary function? Brother Yu asked. Didn't I stop doing quests yesterday? The GM said it was a temporary function for me. Gu Fei said. Everyone raised their eyebrows. Many of them didn't know about what happened in the dungeon. When they heard that the GM had activated a function for Gu Fei, they all came over to gossip. It hasn't been resolved yet. After hearing the gossip, everyone asked. He hasn't told me yet. He said he would tell me after it's resolved. Gu Fei said. You're ruthless. Everyone said. At this time, Yin Zhongmu came over again. Everyone, what are your plans? Yin Zhongmu was busy setting things up and didn't have time to gossip. Moreover, at this moment he was excited to go and destroy the Eagle group, so he didn't have the mood to listen to any gossip. The guild was organizing things, so he came over to ask these experts how they could participate. We'll just do as we see fit, Han family young master said. Oh, then I'll leave it to you, Yin Zhongmu said politely, and then valiantly led his guild. On the Eagle group's side, Forever told Bison to hurry and teleport back. In the end, Bison angrily said no. Forever didn't understand. Bison could only say that he was tied up and couldn't take out a teleportation scroll from his pocket. He was looking for a friend to help him. Of course, apart from the 30 people in the Eagle group, there were also other friends. Bison had died and returned home, so there were still people who could help him untie the ropes. However, the person hadn't arrived yet, so Bison could only pitifully hide in a corner and wait. On the other hand, Forever was anxious. Bison couldn't come back, so he could only ask everyone about how he met Qianli. You're saying that he seemed to be waiting for you there? Forever frowned. I think it's very likely. It doesn't look like a coincidence at all. It's as if he knew I was going to appear there. Byasin recalled the scene when Gu Fei leaned against the wall and called out to him. Now that he thought about it, that smile was extremely perverted. Could it be that he has some special method to find us? Forever realized the severity of the situation. Although they were an elite group, they were still weak. The reason why they attacked head-on was to establish their dominance and create psychological pressure for the players of the 10-Guild Alliance. The only way they could continue to fight was to hide in the dark and attack whenever they had the chance. However, if their whereabouts were completely grasped by the other party, it would be very troublesome. In this situation, it was better to be safe than sorry. Forever's reaction was extremely fast. After understanding the situation from Bison, he immediately informed everyone. At the same time, a kite on the top floor of the church discovered the movement of some teams in the city. After understanding the coordinates of each team and observing the teams that had been discovered, the kite came to a conclusion. The 10 Society Alliance was accurately tracking them. Retreat, everyone retreat. Retreat from Moonlit City for now. Forever was very decisive. Since they were going to hide, they might as well just leave Moonlit City. Yin Zhongmu and the others weren't slow, but they couldn't compare to Forever's simple analysis. With an order, everyone took their teleportation scrolls and left Moonlit City. In less than a minute, when Gu Fei's coordinates refreshed, he immediately realized that the 14 targets were no longer in Moonlit City. They all ran. Cloud Twilight stared blankly. He was in high spirits and his fighting spirit was high. Yes. Gu Fei replied regretfully. This is called beating the grass to scare the snake. The Han family's young master looked at Gu Fei with disdain. Your appearance was too conspicuous. They must have figured out that we have this method of knowing their location. Don't worry, I'll send a warrant across the city. Gu Fei patted his wind-chasing emblem and randomly chose a target. With a flash of white light he left. Wait for me to make a scroll, and have 2 people come over. Gu Fei mainly wanted to find 2 people to be his assassin assistants. When he sent this message, he had already appeared in this distant and unfamiliar main city. Gu Fei took the teleportation scroll, and quickly made the coordinates. In the end, the reply from a faraway place was, make more scrolls, send more people. Gu Fei wasn't in a hurry to send the scrolls. Each target could only be teleported once. Gu Fei didn't want to waste this teleportation. He looked at the distance between his coordinates and the other parties. It was not far, but as he scanned the other party's coordinates, Gu Fei discovered that among the 14 wanted targets in a row, except for the coordinates of number 8 by 3, the other 13 were exactly the same. They're all in the same place. Gu Fei hadn't noticed this before. Now that he thought about it, he guessed that the target must have used a teleportation scroll to return to their hometown. Their teleportation scrolls were all in the same series, and the coordinates were all in the same place. Gu Fei hurriedly ran towards the target, constantly looking at the coordinates along the way. No change, no change. The 2 refreshes in 2 minutes didn't change. These people were clearly still together. In 2 minutes, Gu Fei had set foot on the same coordinates as them. However, when he looked around, he didn't see such a group of people. Gu Fei also knew that the area of a coordinate was quite large. However, this was a long and narrow street. If it were any other street, it definitely wouldn't be this coordinate area. At this moment, he couldn't see the target in the same area. As such, there was only one possibility for the target's existence. On the roofs on the left and right, Gu Fei looked left and right. The houses on the right were low. Gu Fei took a few steps back and jumped to look around, but he didn't see anyone. On the left was a large building that was 3 stories high. He couldn't see the top. Gu Fei looked at the target's coordinates again, and still didn't move. Through the process of elimination, he could already tell that the target was currently gathered on the roof of this 3-story building. The houses on the left were not all tall buildings. There were also small houses on the left and right side of this building. Gu Fei gauged the height with his eyes. It was impossible to teleport directly up there. If he used a flying hook, they might all be on the roof, and he would definitely be discovered. How did these guys get up there? While Gu Fei was puzzled, he He suddenly couldn't help but laugh. What kind of question was that? Of course they entered through the door. This tall building might be their property, and the roof was an open-air balcony or something. It was easy for them to get up from inside the house, but from outside the building, they could only climb up. Gu Fei's guess was right. This large building was indeed a player's property. Of course, the owner wasn't Eagle Party, but their boss, Matchless Wonder. This large building wasn't bought by Matchless Wonder as a villa. This was one of the large warehouses of Wonder's workshop. The system only provided players with private warehouses, so the capacity was limited. For a large workshop like Wonder's, it wasn't enough. Moreover, the items had to be managed by reliable people, so it couldn't be distributed among thousands of players' private warehouses. As such, they could only use a more realistic style to store the items. The items stored in this kind of player's property weren't discarded, so naturally, they wouldn't be refreshed by the system. At this moment, the 19 members of Eagle Party were gathered on the roof of this warehouse. 8 and 3 were still tied up at the revival point, and couldn't come over. Everyone had serious expressions on their faces, waiting for Forever to say something. Drunken Qianli and the others still came, Forever said. From the looks of it, his strength isn't important, but his unknown skill has a huge impact on us. If they can always find out where we are, then it'll be hard for us to continue. The most important thing right now is to find out what kind of skill Qianli is using. The people we bribed from the 10 Meetings Alliance are already suspicious. Yin Zhongmu only brings his trusted aides with him, so we won't be able to find out anything from them. Let's see if there's any other way, Forever said. The people around Qianli should know what he's doing. I wonder if there are any targets we can bribe. Someone said. Perhaps we don't even need to bribe him. If he doesn't treat it as a secret, then we can just ask around through people we know. Another person said. While they were discussing, they suddenly heard someone shout from the street below. Is there anyone up there? Since he couldn't go up, then let them come down. Gu Fei's method was simple and direct. Butterfly knot. Today's conclusion is, of course, Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Chapter 837. The rooftop of the warehouse was where the Eagle Regiment often gathered. There were tables and benches, and even 2 reclining chairs. At this time, a group of people were gathered in a circle discussing their next move. Suddenly, they heard a shout from the street below. For a moment, everyone fell silent. They looked at each other, and one of them said, "Are they calling us? Who is it?" The other man was puzzled. He stood up and walked to the side of the building. He looked down and saw a man standing in the middle of the street looking up. When he saw half of his body poking out, he quickly waved his hand. That person had originally come over to take a look without much care, but when he saw the attire of the person downstairs, he immediately retracted his body with extreme agility. His expression changed drastically as he said to the other 18 people, "It's 8,000 miles drunk." Everyone was shocked. Forever asked, "How many people?" "Just him," the cowering guy said. "He came so fast." Someone sighed. "Not only fast but also accurate. How did this guy catch up to us?" Forever pondered. "But no matter what, he's alone. It's our chance." Someone suggested. "But since he dared to come alone." Someone hesitated. The 30 members of the Eagle Group all had different personalities. Some were arrogant, some were humble, some were resolute, and some were hesitant. They couldn't make up their minds and could only look at their leader, Forever. Yongzheng looked calm on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. 1,000 miles drunk had come too quickly, so quickly that it had exceeded his expectations. It had even found their lair directly and challenged them to a fight from below. Was there an ambush? Some people like to think of things from a negative perspective. It was safer to do things this way. Forever was this kind of person. Just as he was thinking, the shout came from the street again. "I see you all. Come down. This guy is very savage." Someone said. "I'll go take a look." Someone couldn't take it anymore and stood up. "Wait." Forever stopped him. "He can't come up now. Let's think about it first. In my opinion, he's not bluffing. In the current situation, why is he bluffing at us? What's his motive? I can't think of one. Everyone thought about it and agreed. For something like bluffing, for example, when they surrounded Thousand Miles drunk, he would bluff to scare them. Who would take the initiative to rush up to someone else and bluff? This was too bizarre. Why aren't you saying anything? Are they gone? Gu Fei continued to shout from downstairs. That was what he said, but his mission clearly showed the coordinates of a bunch of people. The coordinates showed that they hadn't moved at all. However, as he looked around, Gu Fei suddenly discovered that the coordinates of number 8x3 were getting closer and closer. Looking left and right, Gu Fei couldn't find any hiding spots on either side of the street. Thinking about it again, the opponent recognized him because of his equipment. Gu Fei took off his outer robe, equipped the Night Streamer sword, and crouched to the side. Gu Fei suddenly didn't say anything. Forever and the others discussed on the rooftop for a while, but didn't come to a conclusion. Some wanted to go down and fight to the death with Qianli. Some felt that there was something strange about Qianli's arrogance, and suggested to wait and see. Forever was also hesitant and couldn't make up his mind. While they were discussing, they suddenly realized that Qianli drunk had been silent for a long time. One of them wondered, did he leave? Let's go take a look, Forever said. One of them got up and carefully walked to the side of the building. He looked down but didn't see anyone. He left. The person turned around and said, maybe he's just standing by the door. Forever said. Although they were looking down, there were still some blind spots. For example, the position of their door was at an angle to the rooftop. They couldn't see it even if they looked out. Hey, Drunk is back. This person didn't see Qianli drunk, but he saw that Drunk was already downstairs. Forever's expression changed and he quickly shouted, tell him to run. What? The person who looked out was startled, but Forever had already rushed to the side of the building and shouted, Shisan, run. Qianli drunk is down there. As soon as he shouted, the person squatting on the street suddenly stood up. He raised his hand and a black robe was draped over his body. He rushed towards Drunk. 1,000 Li drunk. The person from before cried out involuntarily. He was ashamed of his carelessness. Qianli had tricked him with such a simple trick as changing his equipment. The description of a black robe and a purple sword was too deep. Bayashiyama was shocked when he heard the shout, but before he could react, he saw a black figure rushing over. Drunk took out a teleportation scroll in a hurry and used it. As soon as the white light appeared, Gu Fei struck down with a lightning spell. The teleportation formation was destroyed, and Drunk stood there like an idiot. Run, what are you standing there for? Forever said angrily. He turned around and shouted, archers, mages. The people on the rooftop had already gotten up to pay attention. The archers and mages did not need to shout and were already helping. They raised their hands and were about to attack, but Qianli drunk moved again and shrank to the side of the blind spot. The archers immediately stared. The mages could cover the area with AoE spells, but the problem was that Drunk was also there, so AoE spells could not be used. At this time, 81 Shisan had already turned around and wanted to run. But just as he ran a few steps, Gu Fei had already teleported to his side, but he was still not out of his blind spot. The people on the rooftop only had eyes for 81 Shisan, but not for 1,000 Miles drunk. All the long-range attackers were anxious and shouted at 81 Shisan, Shisan, go to the middle of the street, lure him out. But Drunk could no longer answer them. He felt lightning flashing and fire burning on his body. Gu Fei's dual flame flash and lightning palm had already greeted him. How could Bai Shisan escape from Gu Fei's attack? He only felt that his life was flowing away like water, and in the blink of an eye, he was already at the bottom. Before he died, he could only glare at Gu Fei with great grief and indignation. Everyone on the rooftop was stunned. Drunk died in the blink of an eye, and the attacks they saw from beginning to end were only Gu Fei's sword slash and his outstretched left hand. As Yumi Shisan's closest companions, they knew his strength best, but he died so quickly, without any room to fight back. Several mages were angry. Drunk was not there at this time, so they had no scruples about attacking and bombarded the row of spells in that position. The left and right sides were spread out, and behind him was the room. If Qianli Drunk wanted to dodge, he would have to rush forward, and then he would be exposed to their line of sight. Sure enough, a row of spells blasted down, and Gu Fei had no other choice but to rush forward. Then there was the sound of arrows above his head, and the archers had already launched their attacks. Gu Fei tilted his body slightly, and 2 sharp arrows had already streaked past him. The other arrow was a homing arrow. Gu Fei knocked the homing arrow away with a casual swing of his sword. Looking up, he saw a row of people standing on the rooftop. The heroes of the Eagle group were finally willing to show up. Gu Fei quickly waved his hand. Come down. He was very agile and accurate. At this time, Forever seized this rare opportunity to judge Gu Fei's strength. Sniping was already an archer's sharpest and most ferocious attack. At such a distance, as long as the archer didn't miss his shot, no one would be able to dodge it. However, this 1,000 miles drunk just had to casually tilt his body and let it pass. The arrow brushed past him. He had dodged it narrowly, but it also meant that he had dodged it accurately. As long as he could dodge it by tilting his body, he would not even bother moving half a step. As for the homing arrow, that skill was very slow. It was not surprising that it could be shot down at such a distance. Seeing Gu Fei arrogantly challenge again, some people finally could not take it anymore, and rushed down the street without waiting for Forever to speak. Forever wanted to shout, but the words were at the tip of his tongue. He saw who the 3 people were, and thought that if he only watched Qianli drunk dodge the arrows, he would not be able to see much of his strength. He might as well test him out. So the words that were at the tip of his tongue changed to a warning. Be careful. If anything goes wrong, return to the house immediately. No need, he's dead for sure. The 3 people who rushed down were very confident. Maple Blood, ranked 19th on the warrior leaderboard, Flute, ranked 13th on the knight leaderboard, and Qian Mo, ranked 11th on the Grandmaster of Combat leaderboard. The 3 experts teamed up to attack Qianli drunk. The 3 of them, what do we do if they get kite by Qianli drunk? Someone upstairs said worriedly. This person was ranked 7th on the priest leaderboard. Someone heard and immediately shouted at Gu Fei. Qianli drunk, our people are coming down. Don't run if you have the guts. Gu Fei raised his head and glanced around. He did not know who shouted, but he replied with dissatisfaction. Which I saw me run. Don't kite if you have the guts. The direct provocation was a little childish. Gu Fei knew what a kite was and shook his head. I will never use a kite if it's below 3 digits. What 3 digits? The person on the rooftop did not understand. Number of people, Gu Fei said. The people on the rooftop looked at each other. Could it be that the rumor of 1,000 kill was true? Was this person's strength really so terrifying that it defied logic? While they were talking, the 3 people had already rushed downstairs. The door opened in an instant, and Maple Blood rushed to the front and shouted, 1,000. Fuck me. He only shouted one word, but Gu Fei's reaction was fast. Seeing someone rush out, he swung his dark night light sword, and immediately a wall of electricity was laid out, arriving at the same position as Maple Blood. Maple Blood was immediately sucked into the wall of electricity, twitching. DZ and Qianma did not rush as fast as Maple Blood, and luckily escaped. Seeing Qianli drunk attack them the moment they stepped out, the 2 of them shouted, Despicable! What's the rush? It's not like I'll die. Gu Fei smiled. The wall of electricity was indeed difficult to electrocute, but the people who were sucked into it would be very embarrassing to break dance. Moreover, they would have to dance for a full 20 seconds. How could they endure it? Moreover, Gu Fei was an enemy, and how could they believe the words of an enemy? DZ waved the staff in his hand, and healed Maple Blood's HP. It was clear that he was a radiant knight. Gu Fei smiled and did not pay attention to it. The people on the rooftop still could not see what was happening at the corner of the door, and only saw the flashing of electricity, which was even more terrifying. DZ helped Maple Blood, and at the same time, carefully observed Qianli drunk's movements with Qianma, in case of a sneak attack. At the same time, they were also anxious. Maple Blood was sucked into the electricity, and it seemed like he couldn't come down. At this time, if Qianli drunk attacked, how could he dodge? In the end, Gu Fei just laughed and watched them busy, and did not have any intention of coming up to make a move. At this time, the people on the rooftop had already asked what happened in the channel. The The mages and archers wanted to attack Gu Fei again. But when they heard that he even let go of such a good opportunity to attack, they looked at each other and were a little embarrassed to make a move. As for waiting for people to go out, it was a sneak attack. DZ and Qianma did say it was despicable, but in fact the Eagle group did not think much of it. What sneak attack? How could it be considered despicable? They had sneak attacked the 10 Guild Alliance for a whole day. 20 seconds later, the wall of electricity disappeared, and with DZ's help, Maple Blood's HP did not decrease. But after trembling for almost half a minute, it suddenly stabilized, and Maple Blood was not used to it. Gu Fei smiled in front of him, and raised his sword. Come on! At this time, Gu Fei was full of mana, and this was actually the real reason why he threw the wall of electricity. He knew that the opponents were all masters, so the battle would be more intense, so it was safer to use all his mana. The three of them confidently challenged him to a duel. And Gu Fei was also wary of any strange tricks they might have up their sleeves. Maple Blood roared, and charged forward. Gu Fei frowned. Why didn't the three of them have some sort of mysterious teamwork? This guy was so impulsive. If he knew this would happen, he would not have wasted those 20 seconds. Gu Fei dodged to the side, and skillfully swung his sword to chop off the head. Maple Blood was embarrassed from being electrocuted, but he still had some skill. Seeing that Gu Fei had dodged, he immediately used Whirlwind Slash. Gu Fei could not take this skill head-on, and could only retreat. Maple Blood did not care about his anger, and kept using Whirlwind Slash, sweeping towards Gu Fei. Gu Fei raised his sword and used Lightning Spell on Maple Blood. But he was a warrior, not a mage, and his skill would not be interrupted by an attack. Flute immediately used Holy Heal, and Maple Blood was still in HP. Whirlwind Slash continued to sweep, and Gu Fei could only avoid it. At the same time he was surprised. How could this guy's anger not be used up after so long? Gu Fei was also a person with a lot of PK experience. He also had a good understanding of the combat characteristics of each class. For a warrior, if they didn't have rage, then they couldn't use any skills. Therefore rage control was a huge field of study. Wuxiang, that braggart, often talked about this. But this Maple Blood, who kept using Whirlwind Slash, clearly did not fit the anger control that Unscathed in Battle often talked about. Gu Fei did not dare to face it head-on, and retreated while dodging the Whirlwind Slash. On the side, Flute secretly laughed. He did not directly participate in the battle, and could see clearly from the side. Qianma had already sneaked behind Gu Fei while Qianli's attention was on Maple Blood, and had already silently extended his fist. Qianma was ambushing, and very seriously ambushing. He was not like Bai and Zai's three, who shouted when his sword was about to stab someone. From start to finish, Qianma did not make a sound. His right hand was above, his left hand was below, and his palms were facing each other at his waist, silently accumulating power. He, Qianli, and Maple Blood had already formed a straight line. Although Maple Blood was circling, he could clearly see the situation. He was also consciously forcing Qianli into this path. Easy. Flute secretly laughed. He knew what skill Qianma was going to use. If Qianli retreated like this, as long as he stepped into the range of Qianma's Qi wave, Qianma would use Qi to push him into Maple Blood's Whirlwind Slash, and then everything would be over. Die. Flute muttered in his heart, but suddenly his eyes flashed. He saw that Qianli's left hand seemed to be flashing with some kind of light. He retreated another step. This step by Gu Fei finally gave Qianma the chance he had been waiting for. Both of his palms pushed out from his waist, and the surging Qi power gathered for a long time, but Qianma still did not make a sound. A strong wind swept out, and Qianma saw Qianli turn his head. He thought, "It's too late for you to notice now." Who would have thought that when Qianli turned his head, he would actually smile at him, and the person following him would actually disappear. Qianma was shocked, and then he heard Flute and Maple Blood shout at the same time. "Behind you!" Qianma didn't even turn his head to look, and wanted to turn around to dodge, but a palm was already pressing down on his back. "Go!" he heard Qianli say to him, and then he felt his body go numb like he was electrocuted, and then he flew out uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, the person who was pushed into Maple Blood's Whirlwind Slash wasn't Qianli, but him. Maple Blood obviously wouldn't drag his own brother to death, and seeing that it was Qianma, he immediately stopped the skill. Qianma wasn't injured, but he crashed into Maple Blood. Gu Fei shot forward, and the three were shocked. Gu Fei's target wasn't Maple Blood or Qianma, but Flute. Why are you just watching and not doing anything? Gu Fei smiled, and his sword was already slashing down towards Flute. Flute hurriedly raised his scepter. Qianli's sword didn't look fast, and it seemed like he could block it with this move. But Gu Fei's sword changed direction at this moment, and with a pull and a push he immediately changed his attack style. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, and Flute didn't even see what technique it was. He only felt that he was like an idiot, and Gu Fei's sword was clearly aimed at his chest. Flames rolled up, and Gu Fei chanted dual flame flash. Flute knew that it was impossible to dodge, but he used his skills very smoothly. Blessing and holy healing fell on him almost at the same time as the flames. Of course, Flute didn't die, and Maple Blood and Qianma rushed over to help. One used Charge, and the other Grandmaster of Combat's horse-riding Meteor. Their speeds were almost the same. In a flash, Gu Fei had actually snuck behind the Flute, and very unkindly pushed the Flute forward. In Gu Fei's wanted list, these three were all on it. He was busy, but in reality he wanted to kill them with a borrowed knife. 8 and Zissin were sent to prison because they had no other choice. For these people, Gu Fei felt that he had to think of a way. Flute was pushed forward, and it was another test of Qianma and Maple Blood's skills. Gu Fei was about to admire the results, when he suddenly suffered a heavy blow to his abdomen. Gu Fei's body flew backwards, and he was very confused. Flute's back was still facing him, and he actually didn't know what attack hit him. At the same time, Maple Blood had already stopped charge, and suddenly jumped over Flute's head. Earth-splitting slash. Chapter 838. Gu Fei was flabbergasted. He had clearly been attacked, but he didn't know how the attack came about. This was something he had never even dreamed of. However, there was no time for him to think too much. His body that was sent flying was still unstable, but Maple Blood had already flown over DZ's head and descended from the sky. His speed was even faster than Gu Fei's. Gu Fei couldn't do anything in this situation. He could only casually raise his sword to meet the attack. Maple Blood laughed coldly. The power of earth-shattering slash wasn't something that could be blocked so easily. Although he knew that the damage dealt by skills was determined by the system, Maple Blood still subconsciously tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword. He secretly exerted all of his strength, wishing that he could slice Thousand Miles Drunk in half with this strike. The two swords clashed. Maple Blood felt that the sword he blocked had no power at all. He inwardly mocked Qianli's overestimation of his abilities. However, he didn't expect Qianli's Drunken to fly out horizontally the instant the two swords clashed. It looked like he had been sent flying by Maple Blood's sword. However, with the power of Maple Blood's sword, Qianli's Drunken was actually sent flying horizontally. Maple Blood felt that it was inconceivable. However, no matter how incomprehensible it was the truth. Maple Blood's sword struck the ground in the blink of an eye. The earth trembled as if it was going to split open. It lived up to the name of earth-shattering slash. As for Gu Fei, he was sent flying to the ground, but he was unable to maintain his balance. He stumbled and fell to the ground, but with his quick reflexes, he rolled and got up again. It was no different from not falling at all. Just now, Gu Fei had changed the power of the attack to fly horizontally. The technique was extremely difficult. Even he couldn't control his body after completing this change. Fortunately, he dodged the damage from this skill. Gu Fei flew out of earth-shattering slash's attack range. However, his opponent's reaction was extremely fast. Although Maple Blood was still in the posture of landing with earth-shatter slash, Flute was already waving his scepter and chasing after Gu Fei. He wanted to take advantage of Gu Fei's unstable landing to continue to deal a heavy blow. But after Gu Fei rolled on the ground, it was as if nothing had happened. When he saw Flute rushing towards him, he did not hesitate to twist his body to meet him. With a flick of his wrist, he slashed his sword towards Flute. Flute hurriedly waved his scepter to block, but Gu Fei casually spun his flute and blocked nothing. Seeing that the tip of the sword was about to reach him, Gu Fei was just about to open his mouth to chant when he suddenly felt a pain in his chest. Another inexplicable strike had struck him. This time he didn't fly away, but the loss of HP showed that the damage of this attack wasn't light. After suffering the same loss twice, Gu Fei wasn't so slow that he didn't notice anything. He carefully observed the situation on the battlefield and noticed something. In these two exchanges, he didn't pay much attention to the Grandmaster of Combat called Qianma, because this person always seemed to be half a beat too slow. Whenever he charged, he would rush behind others. Just like now, he also came to chase after Gu Fei, but as a standard combat class, he wasn't even as fast as a support-type paladin. He was currently still behind Flute. Gu Fei didn't see what he did, but he could already conclude that these two attacks were probably caused by this guy. Gu Fei watched carefully. Maple Blood and Flute didn't do anything at all. Even using the elimination method, he could tell that this guy was behind this. But as for what method he used, Gu Fei didn't know. It was probably some kind of strange game skill. As soon as Gu Fei thought about it, he began to be wary of Qianma. He stepped to the side, wanting Qianma to appear in his field of vision. But this guy seemed to have steeled his heart, and refused to show himself. Flute also cooperated and tried to hide him behind his back. Gu Fei thought of something and quickly took 2 steps back. He casually summoned an area of effect spell. In the end, the two of them had to keep dodging at the same time. Then they continued to rush towards Gu Fei. Maple Blood had also arrived, rushing side by side with DZ, while Qianma continued to hide behind them. Gu Fei couldn't figure out his opponent's strangeness at the moment, so he just avoided fighting. His movement speed was much faster than the three of them. Once he started running, it was obvious that the three of them wouldn't be able to catch up. But immediately after that, the rooftop was filled with whistles, laughter, and taunts. In any case, they were all looking down on Gu Fei. At this time he was running around in circles, which was very much the essence of kiting. Forever didn't engage in such meaningless provocations. He was only happy to see the three of them fighting Qianli to a standstill. At this time he also didn't want to continue leading the group to enjoy the show. With a wave of his hand in the channel, the rest of the members of the Eagle group went downstairs. Gu Fei was very observant. He already saw that the people on the rooftop were all coming down, and didn't want to continue watching the show. He finally waited for the cooldown of his teleportation to be over. Suddenly, he rushed towards the three of them. The three of them greeted him calmly. Gu Fei didn't say anything and immediately teleported behind the two in the front row. But the three of them were obviously prepared for Gu Fei's teleportation. When they saw Gu Fei disappear, they knew where he would appear. The moment Maple Blood and Flute turned around, Qianma passed between them. The three of them changed their positions. The two of them were still in front, and Qianma was behind. Gu Fei didn't succeed in catching Qianma, but seeing that the three of them maintained their positions, he became more and more sure of his deduction. He didn't hesitate to take a step back and asked the three of them with a smile, "Hit the cow across the mountain?" The three of them were shocked. They didn't think that in just a few rounds, Qianli would be able to predict Qianma's skill. That's right, it was hit the cow across the mountain. Gu Fei even guessed the name of the skill word for word. After all, it was a term that was closer to Gu Fei's expertise. In the game, this skill belonged to the Qi Master after the Grandmaster of Combat class advancement. It was a support skill that could be used in conjunction with other skills. Any other offensive skills could complement this hit the cow across the mountain. As the name suggested, it could deal damage through walls, trees, and even people. This damage was weaker than the original skill's direct attack. But as the user's proficiency in the skill increased, the damage would continue to be adjusted. With Qianma's current proficiency, not only would the damage not be weakened, it would even be increased. In the parallel world, where there was no immunity to attacks from the same team, this skill was quite useful. Qianma fought with the Eagle Party, and was most used to this method, hiding behind others to attack. This way, the opponent wouldn't be able to see his attack. Even someone like Gu Fei couldn't defend against it. He could only helplessly increase the distance between them. The three of them couldn't move as fast as Gu Fei, so they couldn't catch up to him. But there was nothing they could do. The two of them were in a stalemate, and Eternal had already led the others downstairs. The two teams were online. Other than 8 and West 3, who had been sent to the dungeon by Gu Fei, all 19 of them were present. "You're all here." Gu Fei nodded, a gratified expression on his face. He didn't look like he was helpless against Qianma's hit the cow from a distance. "Don't run if you have the guts," someone from the Eagle Party shouted at Gu Fei. "I came all the way here. Why would I run?" Gu Fei said. "Then why don't you just stand there and fight us? Why are you running around?" When the others saw that Gu Fei was wary of Qianma's hit the cow from a distance, and could only use his movement speed to deal with it, they immediately mocked him. But Gu Fei laughed back. "Of course, don't you run when you're piking?" Gu Fei didn't think that running around was embarrassing. He was proud of his footwork. "TSK, you sure have a lot of excuses," someone from the Eagle Party said. While they were bickering, Forever had already started to surround Gu Fei. Gu Fei seemed to be having a good time bickering and didn't notice. Just as everyone was in position and Forever was about to give the order to attack, Gu Fei suddenly raised his finger and teleported to the roof. "Fuck, don't run," someone yelled. The only reply he got was a bolt of lightning from the sky. Gu Fei stood on the roof and looked at him with disdain. "Who's running?" "Then why don't you come down?" The people from the Eagle Party were helpless. Of course, the roof wasn't as high as the roof of their warehouse, but it wasn't a place that normal players could go up whenever they wanted. Gu Fei flashed forward, and the Eagle Party's melee players couldn't attack him. They were all blinded. They only had 5 ranged players, including mages and archers. They had tried to attack Gu Fei from above, but the results weren't ideal. At this moment, Gu Fei was looking down from the high ground, using long-range spells and throwing rubbish at people from time to time. Even though the damage was minor, the people who were hit were in a bad mood. Forever commanded a few ranged players to attack a few times, which Gu Fei easily dodged. Then he counterattacked with AoE spells, which were easily dodged by the players of the Eagle Party with his garbage cast time. More importantly, most of the players on the street were unable to use their strength, and were hopping around anxiously. Gu Fei was now standing high up, and everyone could see him. Qianma, who had tricked Gu Fei twice, was taken care of by him. Even though Qianma dodged most of his attacks, there wasn't a single moment of rest for him. It was tiring for him to keep running around. Gu Fei was getting more and more excited as he kept his eyes on Qianma. The other 18 members of the Eagle Party were feeling lonely. Gu Fei didn't seem to care about them anymore. Sometimes they would dodge, but that was only because Gu Fei accidentally hit them when he was bombarding Qianma. "Stop him, stop him." Qianma was panicking. He had been chased and attacked. He had been hit by lightning spells twice, and he almost crashed into a wall of electricity once. Another time, he was hit by an AoE spell. Even though he wasn't in danger with the help of the priest, he was still tired from being chased and attacked. What was even more infuriating was that the 18 brothers around him were all staring at him, as if they couldn't help at all. Qianma started to complain in frustration. Chapter 839. Everyone heard Qianma's complaint, but there was nothing they could do. If they wanted to attack Gu Fei, the melee classes had to go up to the roof. However, the system didn't provide any jump skills in the parallel world. If players wanted to jump, they had to do it themselves. No one could jump onto the roof. As for the ranged classes, they could still attack. However, they were unable to do anything to Gu Fei. At first, Forever had hoped that 1,000 Miles Drunk would be able to quickly exhaust his mana by casting spells, but after more than 10 minutes, he was still casting spells as he normally would. Even an orthodox mage that added intelligence wouldn't be able to continuously cast spells for so long without needing to replenish their mana. Forever knew that the other side definitely had some sort of mana regeneration equipment, so he stealthily looked for an angle to move forward. Once he was within range, he hurriedly used identification. They always wanted to see Gu Fei's equipment to determine Gu Fei's mana consumption and replenishment cycle time, and then come up with a strategy. As the top player on the night leaderboard, Eternal was also level 43. He wasn't the only one. Everyone in the Eagle Party was at level 43 in the parallel world. They didn't have any problem using Identify on Gu Fei. Unfortunately, the mana return was a piece of equipment that surpassed their current level. Even with Identify, they could only get a question mark. Eternal didn't know what he wanted to know, but he made a more valuable discovery. The Windchaser emblem. This piece of equipment could be obtained through a bounty quest, but it didn't have any grade to speak of. After appraising it, Eternal's gaze swept across the Windchaser emblem, and the random teleportation function of the wanted target appeared before his eyes. Eternal finally knew why this person could hunt them down so quickly and accurately. It was because of the PK points that some of their members had. Eternal had never heard of this function, so he couldn't be wary of it. He wasn't annoyed that his members didn't clear their PK points in time. Since he already knew the other party's methods, there would always be a way to deal with it. He was not someone who only knew how to blame the heavens and blame others. At this moment, he had already begun to quickly calculate in his mind. In the end, he heard several people shouting at him, "Forever!" "Ah!" Eternal responded subconsciously. Then he noticed that the sky above him darkened. He looked up and saw Qianli flying down from the roof like a huge bird. Although Gu Fei kept attacking Qianma, he knew that it wasn't enough to kill these top players. The reason why he kept attacking Qianma was not because Qianma's attacks had caused him to suffer twice. Of course, he did have some thoughts of revenge, but that was just along the way. Gu Fei's real purpose was to choose a target and attack it relentlessly. This way, he could numb the others and make them gradually lower their guard. Gu Fei knew that in order to kill these top players, he had to rely on a series of close-range attacks. The street was the river, and the 19 members of the Eagle group were the fish. Gu Fei, who was standing on the roof, was the fisherman on the riverbank. But even Gu Fei didn't expect his luck to be so good. The first one he caught was the leader of the Eagle party, Eternal. Gu Fei didn't know Eternal, nor had he seen him before. But he knew that this was definitely him. This wasn't the first time that Gu Fei had seen this person giving orders to the Eagle party. As for forever taking the bait, it had nothing to do with Gu Fei's fishing skills. It was because he saw that Gu Fei had an endless supply of mana that he came forward to scout. In the end, he didn't manage to scout what he wanted, but he did manage to scout the new function of the Windchaser emblem. And Gu Fei wanted to numb the opponent and lure them into his trap. But he ended up baiting them with his continuous spell attacks. These two fellows had the intention to plant flowers, but the flowers never bloomed, while the willows grew shade unintentionally. Gu Fei's sword had already slashed downwards. Always was lost in his thoughts. He only reacted when he heard the shouts of his brothers, but the night streamer was already right in front of his face. Eternal hurriedly raised his sword to block the attack. He raised his hand and cast a black mark on Gu Fei's body. The paladin's curse skill was like teleportation. It didn't have a flight time like an archer's attack or a mage's spell. Gu Fei couldn't dodge this kind of attack. The black light turned into a mark and flashed in the center of Gu Fei's head. Gu Fei saw that he didn't take any damage. He didn't know what it was, but his skills weren't interrupted, so he continued to slash down. Eternal's reaction was too late. He wanted to block the attack, but Gu Fei knew that he wouldn't make it in time, so he didn't use any tricks. The sword accurately struck Eternal's shoulder. Flames poured down, instantly igniting half of Eternal's body. The Eagle team's mages were all shocked. They all knew that the dual flame flash would cause the target to take continuous fire damage. However, Gu Fei's dual flame flash had such an impactful burning effect. They didn't know how much proficiency he had in this skill. Compared to the dual flame flash of an ordinary mage, it was like a completely different skill. Eternal took this attack, and his HP dropped by a large chunk. Bystanders might not think that losing so much HP was something to be afraid of, but people were different. They all had different equipment and different defenses. The fact that Gu Fei's attack had taken away Eternal's HP was enough to shock him, but he immediately cursed himself for being an idiot. In that instant, he had hit Gu Fei with a Dark Paladin's intelligence curse, which weakened the target's intelligence stat. Eternal knew that he had reacted too late, and that there was no way he could have dodged that attack. As such, he quickly cast an intelligence curse on Gu Fei in order to reduce the damage of the attack. However, when he saw that the damage was still so terrifying, he realized that Qianli was an agility-focused mage. Where would he find the intelligence to weaken his curse? Qianli's magic damage depended on his equipment, skill proficiency, and finally his intelligence. If Eternal wanted to weaken Gu Fei's intelligence to limit Gu Fei's damage, it was clear that there was a problem with his intelligence. Eternal didn't hesitate to cast another curse. At the same time, he prepared to dodge to the side. However, Gu Fei's attacks were extremely fast. When Eternal wanted to run, Gu Fei had already landed on the ground and followed up with a second attack. A lightning palm slammed into Eternal's head. Lightning palm had a knockback effect, but Gu Fei had used it from above. It did have a knockback effect, but it couldn't bury Eternal in the ground. Eternal felt his body tremble, and his feet seemed to have grown roots in the ground. He couldn't move at all. Eternity's heart trembled, but Gu Fei had already landed in front of him with a smile. He raised his sword, and a series of clanging sounds rang out. Dual Flame Flash was on cooldown, but Gu Fei wasn't idle. He attacked Eternal with a normal attack. Knight's equipment was similar to Warrior's. Eternal wore black armor, but his physical defense wasn't bad. Although the Knight Streak Sword's physical damage wasn't low, Gu Fei hadn't fully activated the sword's coefficient. His magic damage was boosted by the Knight Spirit Robe, his mage class, his magic mastery skills, and skills like Dual Flame Flash. In comparison, the Knight Streak Sword's physical damage was just normal. Gu Fei didn't have any strength, so when it hit a top-tier player with top-tier equipment, it was a bit pitiful. This wave of attacks was far more dazzling than the Dual Flame Flash and Lightning Palm, but it was all bark and no bite. Eternal was shocked to death at first. He thought that this was another super powerful skill, but after taking 2 hits and seeing the damage, he felt at ease. In that short moment, Eternal was stunned by the Lightning Palm. Gu Fei's Dual Flame Flash's cooldown was also over. He had already cast a skill, stepped forward and turned around. The twofold Dual Flame Flash had already been cast. Eternal didn't dare to fight Gu Fei head-on. As soon as he felt his body recover, he immediately ran to the side. However, Gu Fei's sword had already landed on his body, and the large amount of magic damage caused Eternal's heart to jump. As a Dark Knight, he chose to increase his agility. He didn't invest any HP, and relied on his top-tier equipment to increase his HP and defense. Gu Fei's 2 Dual Flame Flash and 1 Lightning Palm would have killed anyone else. Eternal, who didn't increase his vitality, couldn't hold on much longer. After this attack, he only had a bit of HP left. At this time, Gu Fei's second attack, Dual Flame Flash, had arrived. Eternal was already running fast, but he found that he couldn't outrun the attack, and he was in great pain. However, when Gu Fei's attack landed on him, the flames disappeared, and the attack became pure physical damage. Eternal's HP was enough to withstand the Night Stream Sword's physical damage, and he didn't even dare to look back as he ran. However, the burning effect of Dual Flame Flash was still there, and Eternal screamed, "Quickly dispel!" A mage hurriedly waved his staff, and a blue light rose from Eternal's body, extinguishing the flames left behind by Gu Fei's attack. Eternal looked at his HP, and saw that he only had 3 HP left. His legs were about to give out. Eternal was able to survive Gu Fei's attack thanks to his agility curse. Gu Fei only realized that something was wrong when he started using Dual Flame Flash. The agility curse reduced agility, and a player's attack speed wasn't as directly affected by agility as their movement speed. As such, when Gu Fei was using Quick Strike, he noticed that something was wrong, but he didn't pay too much attention to it. On the other hand, the Dual Flame Flash required one to twist their body and take a step. Maintaining this move mainly depended on the displacement of one's feet. As a result, when Gu Fei used this move, he had already sensed that his speed had suddenly decreased by quite a bit. As a result, his Dual Flame Flash failed. Even though he managed to hit Eternal with his second slash, the duration of Dual Flame Flash had already expired. The flames disappeared, and the damage dealt by this slash was negligible to Eternal. Chapter 840. Eternal had already run quite a distance away. Gu Fei wanted to chase after him, but after 2 steps he realized that his movement speed couldn't keep up with Eternal's. But at least he had another choice. Gu Fei raised his sword and cast a lightning spell. Lightning strikes came down very quickly, and very few people were able to dodge it. However, there was always one of those few people who could dodge it. Furthermore, experts were always very experienced. When he saw Gu Fei raise his hand, he had a premonition and hurriedly dodged to the side. The lightning that descended from the sky struck empty air. Gu Fei had another choice, which was teleportation. But he didn't use it. He never intended to use it, because he was saving it for when he went back to his room. After exchanging a few blows with these people, Gu Fei realized that they were difficult to deal with. Compared to the veterans, they were completely different. They were true experts and had a deep understanding of the game's skills. They were able to accurately judge their opponent's every move. Just like how Gu Fei raised his hand, Forever was able to react quickly to the fact that it was a lightning spell. If it was a veteran soldier, they might be able to react quickly, but they definitely wouldn't be able to make such a quick judgment. Moreover, the veterans' reactions weren't on the same level as Gu Fei's. After all, they were veterans. Perhaps they still had battle experience in their memories, but their reactions and skills required a long period of training to maintain. The veterans had their jobs and their lives. Of course, they couldn't maintain their bodies at peak condition like they did when they were in the army. Most of the veterans chose to use bows and arrows as their main method of attack. This wasn't just out of habit, but also because they had no other choice. Perhaps after entering the game, they discovered that their bodies were rusty from the high tempo of close combat. Although their speed and strength were given to them by the game's data, their reaction speed wasn't something that could be simulated by the game's data. In comparison, the veterans' coordination and tactical awareness were things that normal players couldn't compare to. But with their pitiful equipment, they weren't able to display much of their strength. The current Eagle Party could be said to be an elite in terms of equipment. Although their coordination wasn't as professional as the veterans, it was more suitable for the game, and could bring out the full potential of each class. The strength of the Eagle Regiment was stronger than that group of veterans, not weaker. At the end of the day, the players of the Eagle Party were better at playing the game than the veterans, and the veterans were new to the game. They didn't have the opportunity to make up for their shortcomings, and their strengths could only be displayed under limited circumstances. Therefore, Gu Fei didn't dare to be careless against the Eagle Party. This was evident from the fact that he chose to wait patiently on the rooftop, instead of fighting the 19 players head-on. Therefore, at this time, Forever ran away. Gu Fei did not choose to use teleportation to chase after him, because he believed that teleportation had a more important use. Although it was a pity that he wasn't able to kill Eternal, Gu Fei didn't lose his cool. The other members of the Eagle Party weren't just watching as Gu Fei and Eternal fought. It was because the two had fought too quickly. Only a few seconds had passed. Eternal had just escaped from Gu Fei's attack range, and everyone knew that Gu Fei had been cursed by Eternal's agility, so they immediately took the opportunity to attack. Arrows, spells, the first to arrive were always long-ranged attacks. Gu Fei didn't hesitate. He had saved his teleportation for this moment. He immediately teleported to the rooftop without hesitation. Everyone in. Eternal called out. Gu Fei once again went up to the rooftop, so it was the same as before. Rather than letting him attack from above, Eternal felt that it was better for them to go up to the rooftop. Even if they couldn't hit him, at least they wouldn't be so frustrated. The group of people charged towards the warehouse. Gu Fei threw out an AoE spell, but he didn't care. He just endured the damage and entered the warehouse. During the fight, it wasn't just Gu Fei who was observing them. They were also observing Qianli's strength. They had an idea of how high Gu Fei's damage was. They knew that an AoE spell wouldn't kill them immediately. Gu Fei attacked a few more times, but he couldn't stop them from entering the warehouse. He could only reveal a helpless expression. The members of the Eagle Party started rummaging through the warehouse, trying to find some trash to throw at Gu Fei. However, this was a warehouse owned by Yingqi Studio. Trash had already been thrown out onto the street, so it was impossible for them to take up space. The few of them searched around and found nothing, so they had no choice but to follow the team upstairs. Of course, the fastest person would be at the front. The player at the front was called 18 Touch. He was a thief. From his name, It sounded like he had the potential to live forever. However, 18 Touch didn't want to touch girls. He wanted to touch other people's pockets. 18 Touch was a master thief. He was ranked 12th on the thief leaderboard. He dreamed of the day when he could directly steal beautiful equipment from others. However, the game company didn't have such a shameful setting. The master thief steal skill could only be stolen from NPCs. At this time, 18 Touch was at the front of the group of 19. He hated the feeling of powerlessness he felt when Qianli got drunk and stood on top of the wall. If it wasn't for the fact that it wasn't allowed in the game, he would definitely piss on Qianli's head. Unfortunately, he couldn't piss now. At this time, 18 Touch's cheeks were full of saliva. He hoped that Qianli wouldn't stand too far away. His mouth couldn't be compared to an archer or mage. The roof of the rooftop was a flipper. Of course, it was the same as the door to the room. Otherwise, it would be terrible if someone climbed into the warehouse from here. 18 Touch rushed to the rooftop and pushed open the flipper. He crawled out of the stairs and was eager to spit on the edge of the rooftop. However, just as he stepped onto the rooftop, he suddenly felt something tighten around his ankle. He looked down and found that his ankle was wrapped by a rope. 18 Temptations was startled. His back had already been hit by a palm, and an irresistible force pushed him forward. 18 Temptations flew forward, and just as he was about to jump off the rooftop, he suddenly turned into a cloud of smoke. 18 Temptations' figure had disappeared, and the rope had wrapped around his ankles, turning him into a straw man. Do all of you really have a strange skill? Gufei frowned. When he looked up, he could already see the location of the 18 Touches. The rooftop wasn't very big, and 18 Touch was just beside it. How did you get up here? 18 Touch was shocked. At this time, the second person had already crawled out of the stairs. When he saw the situation on the rooftop, he turned pale with fright. However, Gufei's sword was already burning with flames as it slashed down. At this time, most of his body was still in the stairs. There was no space for him to dodge, raise his weapon to block. After exchanging a few blows, everyone knew that there was no need to resist against Qianli drunk. His sword was too smooth. Just a few swings and the resistance would be futile. This person's reaction was also very fast. He had no choice but to retreat back into the stairs. At the same time, he reached out and pulled up the flipper. What are you doing? This guy shrunk down and sank his butt. He flipped over a person behind him. The people behind him flipped over one after another. The people on the stairs all flipped backward. They only stopped when they reached the corner of the stairs. Those who flipped over all shouted out, "Qianli drunk is up there." The guy who flipped over a bunch of people with his but said in a deep voice, "Fuck, how did this happen?" Everyone was confused. They didn't understand why Qianli would run up in the blink of an eye after getting drunk. How did he get up there? No one was more familiar with this building than them. There was no place to climb. Shit! The bum guy shouted. 18 Touch is still up there. Hurry up and save him. Someone shouted. What are you panicking for? Forever spoke. Everyone looked at him. Right now, Qianli drunk is guarding the exit. He'll kill anyone who shows their head. How do we get up there? Forever said. I'll use my shield to protect my head. Clerics will support me. I think it should be fine. A heavy-armored warrior stood out. This person was called Unstoppable. He belonged to the Eagle team, and was the only heavy-armored warrior in the team. His equipment was good, so his defense was naturally high. He had tanked countless bosses and was ranked 8th on the warrior leaderboards. Even Unstoppable valued him. This was because people like him were very important when it came to hunting bosses. Unstoppable was the only one in the team. When Forever heard Unstoppable's suggestion, he shook his head. Didn't you see Qianli drunk's palm skill? He can push people back. When he saw that he couldn't kill you, he pushed you down with his palm. Forever didn't continue speaking. He looked at the bum guy with a meaningful gaze. He was clearly implying that if he pushed him down, the story of everyone flipping on the stairs would repeat itself. The bum guy's face turned red when Forever looked at him, but he didn't know what to say. The bum guy was actually just a kite. He was originally the second highest leveled player in the team, But he had made a fool of himself today. He had lost a lot of face and hated Qianli drunk even more. I can't even get up there. What about 18 touch? Kite changed the topic. He didn't want everyone to remember his bum skill. Don't worry. 18 touch gives you PK points. Forever said. There's PK points? Isn't that even worse? Everyone looked at Eternal in astonishment, wondering if their captain had been so frightened after the battle with 1,000 miles drunk that he had short-circuited. Hee, the key is that Qianli drunk has a bounty on him. Forever laughed. Everyone immediately understood. However, someone frowned. How can you be so sure? Because this is how he can chase us down. Everything had happened too quickly. Forever didn't have time to tell everyone about his discovery. After hearing the function of the Wind Chaser emblem, Kite said, but he might have just taken a quest from one of us. What if he didn't take 18 touch? Chapter 841. Forever remained calm and unhurried as he continued to smile. I don't think it's possible. Drunk Qianli received these quests in Moonlit City. I think he was originally working with the 10 Societies Alliance. He was the one who pointed out the location of his wanted targets, and the 10 Societies Alliance would go after them. Kite, have you forgotten what you saw on the top floor of the church in Moonlit City? Kiting and recalling immediately understood. Back then, he had seen quite a few small-scale teams moving about. Judging from the number of players, it didn't seem like they were going to fight against the Eagle team. Sure enough, it seemed like they were going after a single target. That's right. Kite nodded. That's why we retreated. And Qianli was able to catch up to us so quickly because of the random teleportation function of his Wind Chaser emblem, Forever said. But how did he receive our wanted quest so accurately? Someone was puzzled by this question. I've been looking into this question for a long time. I believe we'll have an answer soon, Forever said. Oh, no one knew that Forever had this kind of operation. At first, Forever didn't have a clue either. It wasn't until he got in touch with 88 Shisan and asked about the situation in detail that Qianli received a wanted quest because he was drunk. That was why he didn't kill 88 Shisan, and instead asked someone else to do it. This caught Forever's attention. At that time, he felt that Qianli received a wanted quest because he was drunk. In fact, Gu Fei's wanted license had the ability to directly search a person's name and accept a mission. This was something that everyone in Cloud Peak City knew about, but Forever and the others, who were far away in a foreign land, hadn't heard about it yet. At this time, he wanted to ask around and was still trying to find a way to get close to 1,000 Miles Drunk's people, but he didn't know that this matter could be easily found out by just asking a random player on the streets of Cloud Peak City. That was why he still didn't know the answer. In fact, the most important reason was that Yingqi had been forcefully poached by Cloud Tongue. The frontline and second-line employees had all resigned, resulting in a serious gap in communication between the upper and lower levels. Otherwise, it would have been easy to obtain this kind of information through the studio. Perhaps the small and temporary workers working in Cloud City would already know about it. Unfortunately, these people's voices couldn't be heard. The person in charge and assistants of Cloud City had all run away. They were busy counting goods for 5 days and were as busy as dogs. Forever briefly explained the situation to everyone, but they didn't mention it until now. It was clear that Gu Fei was in a hurry. What do we do now? Kite asked after listening to Forever's explanation. I think the problem now is Qianli's drunk. P. Green Bull expressed his opinion. Oh, Forever and the others looked at him. There's only one person in this building. Qianli actually ran up to the roof when he was drunk. If we surround the building, how can he escape? P. Green Bull suddenly realized something. Oh, he can use a teleportation scroll or something. Sigh, that's useless. Using a teleportation scroll was only possible because the members of the Eagle group were rich people who often used teleportation scrolls. If it was a group of normal players who didn't have the strategic awareness to use teleportation scrolls to run around, they would have happily surrounded the building. Let's listen to 18's situation up there, Forever said as he opened the mercenary channel. 18, please respond if you hear me. Kite called. On the rooftop, Gu Fei looked at the bounty number on 18's body and felt helpless. If they killed him, he would go to jail. When he came out, he wouldn't have any PvP equipment. And who knew when he would be found again? As for 8 West 3, he had already lost 2 levels after killing him once. Gu Fei felt that it was a pity to send him to jail. He opened the mission list and looked at the bounty number. This person's name was 18 Touch. Gu Fei was speechless. He thought that this guy was a fan of Tsubasa Sakuratsuka, Fireball, and the others. 18 Touch was entangled by Gu Fei's rope as soon as he came up, and was almost pushed down the stairs. Fortunately, he had the skill Substitute Straw Doll, which allowed him to use a straw doll as a substitute at any time and teleport to any location within the skill's range. Although he was out of trouble, Qianli's Drunken was the strongest opponent in the game so far. 18 Touch didn't dare to be careless and stared at Gu Fei. Previously, Yamishi-san had said that 1,000 Miles Drunk's anti-stealth was indeed very good, but 18 Touch still wanted to give it a try. This was because he was a master thief. Compared to Yamishi-san and the other assassins, his stealth had been improved by his profession, making it harder to be discovered. But looking at the terrain, 18 Touch gave up on this idea. The rooftop wasn't big, and Qianli's Drunken was a mage. 2 area of effect spells could force him to appear. 18 Touch couldn't just float outside the rooftop. What should I do? 18 Touch was thinking about how to deal with Qianli's Drunken. He was extremely distressed when he suddenly heard Qianli's voice. Where's the mailbox? What? 18 Touch was thinking seriously and didn't hear it clearly. I'm talking about the mailbox for sending things. Which way is closer? Gu Fei asked. 18 Touch was stunned. He didn't know how this question was closely related to the current situation. He didn't say anything for a long time. Gu Fei asked again. 18 Touch thought about it and replied, I don't talk to the enemy. Gu Fei was just asking casually. He didn't have the time to send things at this time. But the channel and private chat were full of calls. The guys in Moonlit Night City all wanted him to send scrolls quickly. Gu Fei usually only replied with one word, busy. Which city is this? Gu Fei suddenly asked again. If he knew which city it was, those guys could find a workshop to get a ready-made scroll and come over. In the end, 18 Touch still didn't say anything. Gu Fei had no choice but to run to the edge of the rooftop and look around. He did find a passing player on the street below. Hey, who's that? Gu Fei shouted while trying to attract attention. He raised his hand and summoned a lightning bolt, striking the person in front of him. The player was shocked. He raised his head and saw that there was someone on the rooftop. He thought he was being ambushed and ran away without looking back. Is this method too strong? Gu Fei muttered and moved to the other side. This side was quite far from the street. Lightning definitely couldn't strike him. Gu Fei estimated that his voice wouldn't be able to transmit over. So he turned around and continued to wait patiently. 18 Touch saw that Gu Fei was moving left and right. He took out his dagger a few times and wanted to attack. But every time he took a step, Qianli Drunk seemed to intentionally or unintentionally look back at him. 18 Touch could only hide his dagger again. He tossed and turned, but he couldn't find a good opportunity. Instead, a message flashed in the channel. A kite was calling out. What? 18 Touch asked. How are you doing up there? A kite asked on behalf of the crowd. 18 Touch was speechless. This question was very difficult to answer. Was he good or bad? Did Qianli Drunk attack you? A kite asked. Yes, very strange. 18 Touch said. That's not strange. He didn't attack you because you have PK points and he has a wanted quest. He wants to kill us and lose levels. He doesn't want to send us to the dungeon. A kite said to 18 Touch. Oh, I see. 18 Touch suddenly understood. Then if I kill him, he won't dare to fight back. He just doesn't want to send you to the dungeon. It's not that he can't. A kite reminded 18 Touch not to go overboard. This guy asks for my mailbox and asks where this place is. I didn't tell him. 18 Touch reported to everyone about Qianli Drunk's recent situation. Eternal frowned. He wants to call for reinforcements. He can use his emblem to teleport here, but his companions can't. He doesn't know what this place is called, so he can't tell his companions how to get here. In that case, Eternal thought for a moment and came up with a plan. Those with PK points, go wash them now. Do you still have any teleportation scrolls? You can go to any main city and wash them there. This way, even if Qianli drunk chases after you, you won't be afraid of being killed by him. At most, you'll just go to jail. On the other hand, if they come and help Qianli drunk, it will be troublesome if he catches up again. Once we wash all our PK points, they won't be able to find our whereabouts. When everyone heard this, they all felt that it made sense. Eternal gave 18 Touch another message. After receiving it, 18 Touch acted according to his leader's instructions. He immediately took out a scroll and prepared to teleport. Gu Fei was guarding the streets and asking people where they were. In fact, he was paying attention to 18 Touch's actions. Seeing him take out a scroll, he immediately knew that he wanted to leave. Without hesitation, Gu Fei teleported in front of 18 Touch. 18 Touch was shocked and immediately attacked with his dagger. Gu Fei dodged to the side and slashed down with his sword. Although he was going to jail, it was better than letting him roam freely outside. With this slash, 18 Touch immediately knew that he couldn't take the damage. He had already seen Gu Fei's continuous attacks, which were even more coherent than a grandmaster of combats. Without any hesitation, he used his scarecrow skill. Gu Fei's sword flashed, and the scarecrow was cut in two. 18 Touch disappeared. Gu Fei looked behind him to make sure that there was no one behind him. He quickly stuck his head out, and saw that 18 Touch had left the scarecrow on the rooftop. He had already teleported outside, and was falling down. Gu Fei swung his sword, and the noose flew out and accurately wrapped around 18 Touch's ankle. The end of the noose was a flying hook, and Gu Fei had already hung it on the edge of the rooftop. The length of the noose was calculated by Gu Fei. 18 Touch was falling down. At this height, he estimated that he might still be alive, but he didn't expect his ankle to suddenly tighten. He didn't expect Gu Fei's noose to be able to catch him in this situation. Scarecrow was also a skill with a long cooldown, and it couldn't be used at this time. Once the noose was caught, 18 Touch could no longer fall, and he fell straight towards the rooftop. Chapter 842. What's that sound? In the Eagle Party's warehouse building, there were still some players who hadn't left. Suddenly, a loud noise came from the wall, and the paint on the wall started to fall. They were shocked and asked each other what happened. Could it be that Qianli broke our wall when he got drunk? Someone thought. Impossible. Eternity wasn't a fantasist. He walked over to the place where the sound came from and pressed his ear against it. Fuck your ancestors. When Yong Yuan heard this scolding, he was infuriated and kicked the wall. Who is it? Many people came over to listen. The cursing was still going on. Finally, someone recognized it. It sounds like 18. 18 Touch was hung upside down on the wall, and had just pounced on the wall. It was normal for his voice to be a little different. Eternity didn't recognize the cursing. What's going on? A bunch of people were confused. They didn't continue hiding in the room, and rushed out to take a look. When he looked up, he saw 18 Touches hanging upside down in the middle of the building with one leg tied up. He looked lonely and helpless, but he was quite spirited. He was cursing at the top of his voice as if he was singing a folk song. Gu Fei also poked his head out to take a look. When he saw the members of the Eagle group appear on the street, he waved at them and asked, "Which city is this? Does anyone know?" Of course they ignored him and shouted at 18 Touch, "Idiot, teleport!" 18 Touch was probably in a daze and didn't think about it. His hands weren't tied, so he quickly took out a scroll from his pocket. The moment he opened it, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky and struck him. In this situation, if 18 Touch could still dodge such a fast attack, then he wouldn't have fallen into such a difficult situation. After interrupting 18 Touch's teleportation scroll, Gu Fei smiled at Eternity. "Don't shout so loudly." Eternity clenched his fists so hard that his fingers turned white. He could only use 18 Touch. Even if he died, he would just be in jail. Teleportation scrolls were also considered skill scrolls. Skill scrolls were similar to skills in that they had cooldowns. After being interrupted, they couldn't be used during the cooldown. However, scrolls also had their own advantages. Each scroll had its own cooldown. If a scroll was interrupted during use, he could just change to another one. Of course, 18 had more than one teleportation scroll in her pocket. She immediately took out another one and prepared to use it. She thought to herself that Gu Fei's lightning spell couldn't possibly be ready, and his other spells were so slow that she definitely wouldn't be able to interrupt it in time. Just as she was about to use the scroll, she was suddenly hit on the head, and the scroll immediately went off cooldown. The thing that hit him bounced off and fell to the ground. 18 groping didn't even know what it was. Looking up, Gu Fei casually picked up a few bricks from the rooftop and threw them at him. 18 touch was in extreme pain. The Eagle Party players on the street were also cursing and swearing. They thought that PvP was one thing, but what Gu Fei was doing was inhumane and should be struck by lightning. Gu Fei threw another brick down as he explained helplessly. I can't help it, my spells are slow. It's faster than throwing things. I promise, I'll use lightning spell once it's off cooldown, alright? Everyone coughed up blood. 18 touch hung upside down for a long time. His face was red as he screamed. If you want to live or die, then give me a quick death. What a hero. Gu Fei praised him and nodded. Here comes the skill. Saying this, he flashed another lightning spell. After being struck by lightning, 18 touch still wasn't dead. Gu Fei was also shocked. He's still not dead? As expected of an expert, how can he last this long? The Eagle Party players were also coming up with random ideas. One of them told 18 touch to bend his body and cut the rope himself. 18 touch was so angry that he cursed in the chat. Try bending yourself. It was obvious that bending was quite demanding. 18 touch was a normal person and didn't have the flexibility or the strength of his waist. Eternal was the leader of the Eagle Party after all. He thought of a solution. Wouldn't it be fine if he just had someone shoot the rope? Looking left and right, there were only 2 archers in their group, One Kite and Lulan. However, both of them had PvP points and had teleported away to kill. However, they all had a lot of teleportation scrolls on them. Especially since they were fighting on behalf of their boss. One of them had sent quite a few scrolls. Among them, there were scrolls with coordinates. After Eternal sent out the news, One Kite immediately turned around and came out of the building. Seeing the situation, he knocked his bow and shot without a word. 18 stop swaying. One Kite shouted. In many descriptions, shooting a broken rope was considered an extraordinary archery skill. However, in the game, the system had corrected it. Kiting was a player who had been playing bow and arrow for a long time. If he wanted to shoot a fixed target, even a broken rope wouldn't be a problem. Moreover, he wasn't too far away. One Kite's posture was elegant. He pulled his bow into a full moon and had the expression of a savior. On the other hand, Gu Fei's lightning was very good. He electrocuted 18 touch, but 18 touch still didn't die. Gu Fei, who usually didn't care about the stats of the game, couldn't help but ask, how did you add points? 18 touch gritted his teeth and didn't answer. However, Gu Fei also noticed One Kite's movements and guessed his intentions. He hurriedly grabbed the rope and tried to swing it. 18 touch resisted. His hands and feet tried to create friction on the wall in search of stability. The rope was pulled taut. No matter how hard Gu Fei tried, he couldn't shake it off. One Kite's arrow had already flown out. The sound was rapid. It was a powerful sniping skill. The arrow accurately pierced through the rope, and 18 touches felt his body loosen, as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Just as he was about to fall to the ground, an electric shock coursed through his entire body. 18 touches turned his head to look, and cursed in unison with all the Eagle Party members on the street. Fuck. Qianli's drunkenness was too shameful. Just as 18 touch was about to fall, he used a wall of electricity to stop him in midair. Curses rang out again, but Gu Fei was indifferent. One Kite angrily dodged an arrow, but Gu Fei casually slapped the arrow away. You're going to die now, right? Gu Fei asked 18 touch. You wish. 18 touch was really an unkillable cockroach. The Eagle Party members were panicking. There were priests in the formation, but 18 touch was outside of the skill's range. Once he was in the skill's range, he wouldn't be able to see him. What's the meaning of this? Give Qianli a quick death when he's drunk. Eternal said in a low voice. Okay, the last 2 times. Gu Fei raised his hand and cast another lightning spell. The cockroach didn't die even after being touched 18 times, but after hearing Gu Fei's words, it revealed a frightened expression. It looked at Gu Fei and cried out involuntarily. How did you know? Gu Fei laughed. Appraisal. Impossible. 18 touch denied it. He knew that the HP regeneration equipment he was wearing was a high-grade item that couldn't be appraised with the current standard of appraisal. However, Eternal heard their conversation and came to a realization. 100% appraisal. What? The others were confused. His wind-chasing emblem also has a 100% chance of identifying a wanted target. Eternal had seen the functions of the Wind Chaser coat of arms when he appraised it, but he was more concerned about the random teleportation function. He didn't think anything else was important. 18 What's going on? Eternal asked in the channel. This guy, his attacks are completely calculated with my HP and recovery. His lightning wall has a continuous damage effect, so it can offset my HP regeneration. He just said that he's going to use lightning spell 2 more times. That's just right. 18 touch said. It's fine, he'll go to jail if he kills you, Eternal consoled. No. If I'm not wrong, his next lightning spell will be left at the end. After that, my HP will be at the bottom. If I fall, I'll probably die. 18 touch said. Eternal was stunned. If he fell to his death, this kind of natural death wouldn't be considered a PK. Eagle Party would sometimes take advantage of this under certain special circumstances, so they were very clear about the system's judgment in this area. They didn't expect their opponent to do the same thing this time. The conversation between the two in the channel was of course heard by the others, but they were all at a loss. Qianli's lightning spell was already off cooldown, so he wasn't in a hurry to use it. He smiled as he stood on top of the wall. He kited a few more arrows, but none of them had any effect. The others, whether they were archers or not, were all trying to attack from afar, but it was to no avail. The moment the lightning wall disappeared, just as 18 touch had predicted, a lightning spell accurately fell on his head. 18 touch looked at his HP, and sure enough, he only had a sliver of HP left. He was still half a building away from falling, so the damage was certain. 18 touches glared hatefully at 1,000 Miles Drunk, then fell straight down. There was a loud bang on the roof, and dust mixed with a white light flew into the air. Gu Fei looked at the quest, and 18 touch was still there. He knew that this death wasn't counted on him, so naturally he would be punished with a drop in level. Gu Fei turned around and stood facing the street, welcoming the anger of the Eagle group. Who's next? Some of the members of the Eagle regiment wanted to rush up, but Forever stopped them. He stared at Gu Fei, who was on the roof, and said coldly, "Drunk for 1,000 miles. This matter won't end so easily." "I know," Gu Fei said. "But everyone should hurry up. Playing for too long is bad for your body. Go fuck yourself." Forever lost his composure and cursed. Loyal players hated this type of lecture the most. You have no choice but to admit it. Look at all of you, you guys have a weak lower body. You need to train your body, Gu Fei said. Under Forever's leadership, the Eagle group members gave Gu Fei the middle finger and turned around to leave, but they didn't expect that Gu Fei would flip over and jump down from the platform. Everyone thought that he had killed himself, but they didn't think that he would teleport right before he hit the ground, landing with such ease. He wasn't far from the group, and Gu Fei said calmly, "Where are you going? You guys don't have any PK points and I'm still here. You want to leave?" Forever's heart was beating wildly. Looking at his side, including the kite that had returned at the last moment, there were a total of 7 people. The 6 that hadn't piked were Eternal, Unstoppable, 2 priests, a paladin, and a berserker. Against normal opponents, with these 7 people, Forever wouldn't be afraid, but against Qianli's Drunken, he immediately felt that this team was full of holes. The 2 clerics and the paladin were all support, and Drunken was usually the one being attacked, not the one attacking. As a dark paladin who had been uncursed, according to the game's settings, he had completely fallen into darkness. He couldn't receive the support of a cleric, and the paladin's holy heal wasn't a healing skill, but a damaging one. Without any support, fighting against Qianli's drunken, Eternal immediately thought of the last bit of health he had lost. Thinking about it, there was only one kite and the berserker Mingyue left. Mingyue was ranked 27 on the warrior leaderboards, and was the only player in the Eagle group that wasn't in the top 20. Even though this didn't mean that he was the weakest in the Eagle group, Forever didn't have the confidence to rely on him to block Qianli's drunken. "I'll hold him back, you guys go first." One Kite didn't disappoint Forever, and stood out bravely. Eternal immediately cast an agility curse at Gu Fei, but Gu Fei immediately dodged to the side when he saw him raise his hand. This caused everyone to be shocked. This guy actually wanted to dodge the curse? Was there something wrong with his head? Eternal was quite nervous, thinking that this crazy guy would be able to dodge the curse, which could only be resisted by resistance. But when he saw that it hit, he heaved a sigh of relief. Gu Fei understood that this skill was similar to a cleric's regeneration, and couldn't be dodged by physical attacks. Otherwise, Gu Fei wouldn't have been so afraid of Luolua's regeneration. One Kite shot 2 arrows. Even though Gu Fei was cursed, it wasn't hard for him to dodge these attacks. He didn't move his feet, and when he saw where the arrows were coming from, he dodged them to the left and right. Eternal, the 2 clerics and the paladin didn't have any speed. Even though Gu Fei was cursed, he was still faster than them, and immediately rushed towards them. Eternal used his ability to take hits, and raised his shield to meet the attack. Gu Fei had a lot of experience, and he knew that it would be difficult to kill a heavy warrior with a series of powerful skills. With the support of 2 clerics and a paladin, he definitely wouldn't be able to kill this person in a short period of time. Thus, he chose to avoid the fight and chase after Eternal. But Eternal knew that he wouldn't be able to get any support, so he didn't fight Gu Fei head-on, and turned to run. Gu Fei knew that his speed wasn't as fast as Eternal, and chasing after Eternal was just an act. He changed his target midway, and swung his sword at the paladin. The paladin was called Knight Zephyr, and he was ranked 9th on the Knight leaderboard. His ranking wasn't low, but in the Eagle party he was a rather well-behaved person. He didn't have any special skills, but each of his blessing skills had a high level of proficiency. At this time, he had already cast a spirit blessing on everyone, which added magic defense. With the support of 2 clerics, he wasn't afraid of Qianli drunk, and raised his sword to meet him. Gu Fei swung his sword downwards, easily dodging Knight Zephyr's parry. No one dared to be careless in the face of Qianli drunk's attack. They cast Holy Heal and other skills, but no one expected that Gu Fei would suddenly change direction. After taking a diagonal step, he swung his sword towards the berserker, Mingyue, who was rushing up to save them. At this moment, One Kite was extremely anxious. He had relied on the fact that he had PK points, so even if he died he wouldn't lose a level. He had wanted to protect everyone, but he didn't expect Thousand Miles drunk to dodge his attack so easily. It was as if he didn't exist. At this moment, his sword was about to hit Mingyue. One Kite fired an arrow, but it still didn't help at all. The sword slashed down steadily, and the double flame flash was naturally chanted the moment it struck. As for the double flame flash, Gu Fei didn't use it anymore. After being cursed by the agility curse, he couldn't use this skill that required the soles of his feet. The 2 clerics and 1 paladin rushed to save Mingyue, but the 3 of them had just cast their healing skills on Knight Zephyr, so they couldn't use them. How crafty! Only now did everyone realize why Qianli drunk had faked so many attacks, and they couldn't help but look at him with disdain. At this moment, Gu Fei's lightning palm had already landed on Mingyue's body, sending him flying. At the same time, Gu Fei shot off in the same direction as Mingyue. Everyone saw that after Mingyue was knocked back, she had even left their healing range. They hurriedly closed the distance between them and her. But how could they be faster than Gu Fei? As Gu Fei chased after Mingyue, he cast a lightning spell on Mingyue's head. There was no way for Forever to continue dodging, so he had no choice but to block Gu Fei's path. Yin Zhongmu, who had been cursed by the agility curse, was at a complete disadvantage in a one-on-one fight with Eternal. However, Gu Fei's skills were not at Yin Zhongmu's level. Eternal rained down a barrage of blows from the very beginning. Although the damage was not high, it was enough to make Yin Zhongmu tremble in fear. However, he managed to buy some time. As soon as the three of them entered the skill range, their skills went off cooldown, and they immediately went to help Mingyu. Eternal let out a sigh of relief and retreated. His retreat was quite shameless. Gu Fei's dual flame flash was already upon him, but he knew that this skill wouldn't kill him, so he ignored it and ran to the side, allowing the sword to strike his back. Gu Fei couldn't do anything about it. Once his opponent knew that this attack wasn't fatal, he would naturally act shamelessly. At this moment, the doors to the warehouse opened, and the players from Eagle Party streamed out. Eternal had already informed them that Qianli was drunk, and had them surround him. As for covering and retreating, they were just putting on an act. Eternal could tell that Qianli was also avoiding direct confrontation with them. Eternal's eyes were sharp, and he saw the root of the problem. It was because of Qianli's series of powerful skills that he couldn't instantly kill the players from Eagle Party. This was a fatal effect. Qianli, let's see where you can run this time. One Kite was full of energy. What are you talking about? Gu Fei glanced at Kite in confusion. He pointed at the roof and teleported up. Fuck. Eagle Party yelled. One Kite's face crumbled. What's the point of doing this? Wasting your scrolls, Gu Fei said. Chapter 843. The teleportation scroll was expensive. Although the Eagle Group scrolls were provided by their boss's studio for free, it was also because of this that they couldn't solve their boss's problem even though they were spending their boss's money, which was even more unreasonable. When the Eagle Party thought about how Qianli was able to use such a sinister tactic while drunk, they became even more furious and scolded him even louder. Although they were experts, they couldn't climb up the roof without a ladder or something, so they could only attack him verbally. Actually, Gu Fei didn't have so many thoughts. He didn't know that Forever would summon everyone back. He simply saw that there were too many opponents, so he went up the roof to avoid them. It was Kite who asked him what he meant by that, so he just answered casually. Didn't he see that Gu Fei was still using a question? The two sides fell into a stalemate again. Gu Fei looked around and suddenly said in surprise, "Hey, he dropped equipment." The people on the street heard this and were stunned. Forever looked left and right, but didn't see 18 Touch. He had sent the summon in the mercenary channel. Although 18 Touch had died at the resurrection point, he should have used a scroll to come back as quickly as possible. 18, he dropped equipment? Just as Always On was asking, someone had already seen 18 Touch reappear on the rooftop, and was peeking out. Seeing that Qianli was walking towards the place where he dropped equipment, 18 Touch yelled, and jumped down from the rooftop without hesitation. At the same time, he threw 2 bricks at Qianli, wanting to knock him back. 18 Touch was confident that he wouldn't be killed instantly at this height. He was determined to get his equipment back even if it cost him his life. In the end, Gu Fei raised his head and pointed his night streamer towards the sky, chanting a wall of electricity. 18 Touch coughed up blood. He didn't think that in just a few minutes he would repeat the same thing again. 18 Touch, who was twitching on the electric wall, tilted his head and stared blankly at Gu Fei as he bent over to pick up his equipment. He even raised his head to look at Gu Fei and asked with a smile, "Is it your grass substitute?" When Gu Fei had appraised 18 Touches, he already knew that the dagger he was using was called Grassman Substitute, which had a skill called Substitute Grassman. Now that he saw the dagger on the ground, he guessed that it was this one. Heh, it really is. Gu Fei picked it up and saw that it was indeed Scarecrow. Just as he was about to speak to 18 Touch again, 18 Touch disappeared in a flash of white light. Gu Fei was startled. He thought that 18 Touch had died, but when he looked at the quest list, 18 Touch's wanted quest was still unfinished. The Eagle Party members on the street were also shocked when they saw 18 White Light disappear. However, they had 18 Touch as a friend, so they soon realized that 18 Touch was not dead, but offline. This made him even more surprised. He thought to himself, could it be that this kid has lost all hope in the game because he suffered such a huge blow? They were only half right. 18 Touch had indeed suffered a huge blow, but it wasn't enough to make him lose hope in the game. He was just too emotional, so the system cut him off from the game. He wasn't the first person that had met with Gu Fei like this, and he probably wouldn't be the last. Gu Fei was such an upright person. They were still wondering if they should return the scarecrow to 18 Touch, but who would have thought that he would disappear just like that? The Eagle Party members were still cursing when they saw Gu Fei walk to the eaves. The ranged players raised their hands and prepared to attack, but Gu Fei swung his dagger and smashed it into the mage's head. 18 Touch's dagger. The scolding stopped in an instant. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. For a moment, they couldn't figure out what was going on. The mage picked up the dagger from the ground and looked at it. It really is 18 Touch's dagger. They had been friends for a long time and knew each other's equipment. Qianli drunk, what's the meaning of this? One Kite yelled. He felt like there was a huge conspiracy going on. Why do you always like to ask what's the meaning of this? What's your name? Mischievous Blue Cat? Gu Fei said. One Kite didn't get to finish his sentence before the system started to give him warnings. One Kite quickly calmed himself down, but in that moment he seemed to understand why 18 Touch had disappeared. Qianli drunk, do you want us to owe you a favor? Eternal frowned. But I can tell you that if you drop any equipment, we definitely won't return it to you. No matter how he thought about it, this was the only reason he could come up with for picking up his opponent's equipment and returning it. However, this idea was too naive. You still have the nerve to say that? Gu Fei said. Eternal thought, is this guy really thinking like that? But he wasn't embarrassed at all. Instead he laughed. What's there to be embarrassed about? It's normal for equipment to be picked up by others in the game. Why would I need to return it? Plus, we're opponents. I'm not talking about that. Gu Fei said. I'm saying, do you really have the nerve to say that you'll drop my equipment? Eternal couldn't continue the conversation. The system sounded and he understood 18 Touch. What now? Does anyone want to fight me to the death? Gu Fei asked. Come down. Everyone pointed at him and shouted. Gu Fei ignored them and looked at Maple Blood, who knew earth-shattering slash. Come up. I know that your earth-shattering slash can jump up a building. I've seen it before. Maple Blood obviously wouldn't go up. After exchanging blows with Thousand Miles Drunk, Yi Shiwen had already determined his strength. If they fought him one-on-one, it would be a waste of time. If there were more than one of them, it would also depend on the composition of the members. Healers were very important. Although Thousand Miles Drunk couldn't instantly kill them, the damage was still considerable. If they didn't quickly replenish themselves, it was very likely that they would die in the next round. Qianli drunk, you're an expert. We admit that we're not your opponents one-on-one. Eternal said with a serious attitude. 3 or 4 is fine too, Gu Fei said. Eternal immediately thought about how to form a group of 3 or 4 to fight with Qianli drunk, but someone came over and reminded him. Do we have to keep fighting with this guy? Eternal turned his head and saw that it was the leader of Group 2. The leader of the original Eagle Group, Yang Ying. This reminded Eternal. Under Qianli drunk's repeated provocations, he had indeed lost his cool. He kept thinking about how to get rid of this guy, but the problem was that in the mission that the boss had given them, getting rid of Qianli drunk didn't seem to be the main point. Just as he was thinking, a white light flashed in the air above the warehouse. 18 Touch had come back online. However, the wall of electricity had already disappeared. Gu Fei didn't care too much and allowed 18 Touch to fall down. As soon as 18 Touch landed, he pounced at Gu Fei and shouted, "Give me back my dagger!" Gu Fei dodged to the side and used the momentum to kick 18 Touch up the street. 18 Touch got up and was about to shout again, but the mage had already snatched the dagger and gave it back to him. 18 Touch held the dagger in a daze. When he roared and charged at Qianli drunk, it was just a way of venting his anger. He had the mentality that he didn't want to live without the dagger, but he never thought that he would actually get the dagger back. Now that the dagger was in his hands again, everything felt like a dream. He couldn't believe that this was real. What's going on? 18 Touch asked in a daze. Put away your dagger. Next time it drops, I won't bother to pick it up for you, Gu Fei said. 18 Touch looked at the dagger in his hand and didn't know what to say. Eternal, on the other hand, had completely calmed down. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." The 19 of them were about to leave the street with Gu Fei following closely from the rooftop. Everyone was depressed. They raised their heads and glared at Gu Fei. "Why are you following us?" "Nonsense, why am I here?" Gu Fei said. Everyone coughed up blood. Eternal looked at Gu Fei's posture. It looked like he was following them and would strike whenever he saw an opportunity. He could only wave his hand, and everyone returned to the warehouse building. "Teleport," Eternal said helplessly. "Let's do as we said before. Those who have PK points, go and wash them. Those who don't, do whatever you want." "I don't think we should wash our PK points," Young Eagle suggested. "Once we leave, he'll definitely find some helpers. When he catches up to the people who are washing their PK points, it's very likely that he won't be the only one. If there are others, then there's a chance that they'll be killed and lose levels. I think we should just stay here and grind down our PK points." When Eternal heard this, he felt that it made sense. He immediately nodded. "Then let's all stay here. This place is absolutely safe. Let Qianli do whatever he wants outside. We're all here. What's there for him to do?" Kite mumbled. As a team, they naturally had some entertainment that didn't involve fighting monsters or quests. Plus, they had the backing of the studio and abundant resources. At this moment, they had even brought out mahjong and poker cards. Barbecuing on the rooftop was originally a favorite sport, but when they thought that Qianli would probably go up there again after getting drunk, they could only give up on this entertainment. Gu Fei was outside the building. When he saw that everyone had entered the building, he thought that they would immediately split up. He immediately searched for their coordinates, but he found that they were all at the same location and didn't move. He understood that they were going to stay in the building. Gu Fei couldn't do anything about this. He circled the building twice and even went down to knock on the door. When he asked who was inside, Gu Fei said, "It's me." Immediately, everyone ignored him. Helpless, Gu Fei wandered the streets for a while. The only thing he gained was that he finally found out what kind of main city this was. After sending the news back, it didn't take long for the Han family young master and the others to get their hands on the teleportation scrolls to Grassy City and sent them over. Yun Zhongmu's 10 Guild Alliances team was too large. They could only send 4 teleportation scrolls at a time, so they couldn't afford to send so many. In the end, they chose 50 of their brothers to come and help. Thinking about Qianli's group of top experts who weren't any weaker than the Eagle group, Yun Zhongmu was full of confidence. Gu Fei told everyone the coordinates. When they arrived at Grassy City, they didn't have time to admire the local customs of the main city in the southeast and rushed over. When they arrived, they saw Gu Fei sitting helplessly on the eaves pretending to be the thinker. "What's the situation?" Han family young master asked. Gu Fei waved his sword and knocked on the door. "Inside." "All of them?" Han family young master asked. "All of them." Gu Fei nodded, then said, "Oh, not all of them. One of them was sent to prison." "It's that 88 Shisan. That bastard, he got off lightly," Yin Zhongmu said hatefully. He wasn't happy that 88 Shisan hadn't been killed to level 10. This guy was too arrogant and condescending. "What else?" Han family young master asked. "The one called 18 Touch died once," Gu Fei said. "That's it?" Han family young master asked. "That's it. It seems like the opponents are really hard to deal with." Yutian Shenming and Unscathed in Battle looked at each other. Before, they had been betting on how many people Qianli would have killed by the time they arrived, but they didn't expect the results to be so bad. This Eagle group seemed to be a bit hard to deal with. At least they were forced to hide in the house and don't even dare to come out. "Brother," you said. "What's the point?" Gu Fei sighed. "It's very useless. They've probably already figured out that you're using the wanted mission to find out their location. Right now they're hiding in the house to grind down their PK points. When the time comes, they'll teleport away. Who knows where they'll go?" Han family young master said. "But if they continue to harass the 10 Guild Alliance, they'll still get their PK points. When the time comes, won't they still be found?" Brother, you said. But Qianli can't be online 24/7, right? Han family young master reminded everyone. These people had seen Qianli's methods of tracking their movements when he was drunk. If they chose to go offline to avoid Qianli, then they really couldn't do anything about it. I can't do anything about it. I can't lend my wanted license to anyone, but the Wind Chaser emblem can. Gu Fei was helpless. You're so good at wanted missions and have so many privileges. Can't you go in and capture people? Drifting asked. Gu Fei jumped down from the roof and kicked the door twice. He spread his hands and said, "Look, I can't open it." Then an arrogant voice came from inside. Qianli, you're so annoying when you're drunk. So noisy. Fuck, you're so arrogant. Cloud Twilight was furious. He went up and kicked the door 18 times. Although the door was shaking and shaking, it obviously couldn't be broken. Of course, there were more curses coming from inside, but they didn't know that the person inside had changed. The curses were all directed at Gu Fei, which made Cloud Twilight feel very embarrassed. I think you should go to your faction and ask. Drifting continued his train of thought. Maybe you have the authority to enter and capture people, but you just don't know how to use it. Will they give me a search warrant? Gu Fei smiled. Who knows? Drifting said. Alright, I'll go take a look. Gu Fei was also trying his best. He didn't know where the main city's town hall was, so he randomly chose a direction and walked out of the street. After encountering a player and asking for directions, he really went there. Naturally, there were NPC guards in the town hall that Gu Fei could ask for directions. Gu Fei easily found Flourishing Grass City's guard room. The guard captain of Grassy City was very friendly to Gu Fei. He didn't seem to be unfamiliar with him at all. It was obvious that the World faction was a family. Thus, Gu Fei treated him as if he were a living person and explained the current situation to him. The guard captain understood, but then he told Gu Fei that if he wanted to enter and capture people, he needed a higher authority, and Gu Fei didn't have the authority yet. Gu Fei listened. Although the guard captain's words sounded reasonable, the answer was very NPC style. It was like an NPC giving a hint when he wanted to complete a quest, but didn't have the conditions. Gu Fei guessed that when he leveled up his wanted license, he might be able to enter and capture people, but that was obviously not possible right now. He had no choice but to tell the others. They were still outside the Eagle Group's warehouse, and they had nothing to do. There weren't many people walking on this street. Occasionally, there would be people passing by, and they were quite surprised to see such a large group of people suddenly gathering on this street. When everyone received Gu Fei's message, they knew that it was impossible to enter and kill people. There was no point in guarding the place. They had a lot of scrolls and didn't plan on going out. Thus, everyone dispersed in all directions, following young Master Han's instructions to gather more detailed information about the Eagle Group in the old home of the Eagle Group. On the way back, Gu Fei came up with a brilliant idea. When he met the guards on the road, he showed them his wanted license and recruited 2 guards to accompany them to the warehouse of the Eagle Group. Gu Fei wanted to see if the NPC soldiers had the authority to do so. However, when the 2 soldiers arrived outside the building, they stared at Gu Fei with helpless expressions on their faces. Gu Fei saw that he, as the boss, didn't have the authority, and the 2 guards were even more hopeless. Thus, after thinking for a moment, he flew up to the roof and ordered the 2 guards to knock on the door. Gu Fei lowered his head from the roof and vaguely heard the Eagle Group's players shouting, "Qianli, stop messing around when he's drunk." Gu Fei ordered the guards, "Shout." The guards knocked on the door and shouted, "Open the door, we're under orders to arrest criminal number 34215. Gu Fei fell from the roof. This guard was too honest. He had hoped that the guard would say something to make the Eagle Party realize that it wasn't him. The NPC's voice was very distinctive, so experienced players should be able to tell that it wasn't him. If a player called out to them, they might be suspicious, but if an NPC called out to them, it might be able to lure them out. He didn't expect the guard to tell the truth. Gu Fei listened to the door and heard the guy inside laughing. This 1,000 miles drunk is really sinister. He even pretended to be an NPC's voice. He's quite good at pretending. But this guy is still an idiot. He already pretended to be a voice, so why did he say it was a wanted mission? Does he think we're stupid? Ha 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 ha. 34215. You're a wanted man, are you scared? The people inside laughed. After so long, they realized that Qianli couldn't do anything to them when he was drunk. They felt happy that they had finally made Qianli drunk. Go go. Gu Fei helplessly let the two guards go. How could they really say that they were arresting people? They could even say it was a census. NPCs were NPCs after all. They weren't polite at all. Gu Fei looked at the wanted mission list again. He had originally taken 14 players from the Eagle group, but after completing the mission, there were 13 left. At this time, 3 more missions were marked as failed because the target's PK points had disappeared. Gu Fei felt that it was a bit unfair to fail the mission in this situation. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.